Life is full of contradictions. The harder we chase happiness, the more it escapes. The more we cling, the more we lose. These paradoxes will change the way you see love, pain, success, and even yourself. Stay with me till the end, and if this speaks to you, hit like, subscribe, and share, because some truths are too powerful to keep hidden. The living to die paradox. From the very first breath you take, the clock begins to tick. You don't see it, you don't hear it, but it's there, steady, patient, unstoppable. Every second that passes is both a beginning and an ending. You are living, yes, but you are also slowly dying. That is the cruel beauty of existence. The living to die paradox confronts us with the truth that life and death are not separate, not opposites, but partners in the same dance. Life only has value because it ends, and death, the shadow we fear, is the very force that shapes the urgency of every moment we are alive. Think about it. If you were immortal, what would drive you forward? Would you still feel the thrill of chasing dreams? Would you treasure the laughter of a loved one or the brilliance of a sunset? Probably not. Without death, life loses its sharpness. Immortality would make time meaningless. Endless days stretching into eternity until nothing feels urgent, nothing feels precious. It's precisely because our lives are limited that they matter. Every smile, every choice, every risk has weight, because we know we will not get unlimited chances. And yet, even though we all know this truth deep down, we resist it. We distract ourselves with routines, bury ourselves in petty arguments, cling to shallow pleasures, and act as if we have forever. We convince ourselves that tomorrow is guaranteed, when in reality, every tomorrow is uncertain. This is where the paradox cuts deeper. Being aware of death should set us free, yet often it traps us in fear. Facing mortality requires courage, the courage to step into the unknown, to admit that control is an illusion, and to live anyway. Most people hide from this because it's terrifying. It's easier to pretend we have time than to confront the truth that we don't. But here lies the gift hidden in the paradox. The living to die paradox is not japee, saying a reminder of our mortality. It is a challenge. It dares you to stop wasting time and start living. It whispers in your ear, you are going to die. So what will you do before that moment arrives? Will you spend your life building someone else's dream while ignoring your own? Will you drown in regret? Or will you love fiercely, create fearlessly, and make every second worth remembering? Death takes away the illusion of endless chances, and in doing so, it gives you clarity. It strips life down to its essence. The present moment is all you truly own. Of course, this doesn't mean living will feel easy once you accept death. Even with the awareness that time is short, you will still fall into habits, routines, and fears. You will still hesitate. You will still feel like you are not doing enough. That is part of the human condition. But the paradox teaches us that perfection is not the goal. Presence is. To live fully in the shadow of death means to embrace imperfection, to take risks without knowing the outcome, to give yourself permission to exist unapologetically. The paradox doesn't erase fear, it teaches you how to carry it while still moving forward. At its core, the living to die paradox is a teacher. It reminds you that every heartbeat is not just a countdown, but an opportunity. Every breath is a second chance. Every day you wake up is a question. What will you do with the time you still have? Death cannot be avoided, but it can be honored by how you choose to live before it arrives. In that sense, death is not the end of meaning. It is the reason meaning exists at all. So, you are living to die, that's the reality, but instead of letting that truth haunt you, let it liberate you. Stop waiting for the perfect moment. Stop holding back. Use the paradox as a reminder that time is slipping through your fingers whether you act or not. Choose to live boldly, love deeply, and create something that matters. Because in the end, the paradox gives you the ultimate freedom. The knowledge that, while death is certain, the life you carve out before it is entirely up to you. The suicide survival paradox. It begins in the darkest corners of the human soul. In those heavy moments when despair feels unbearable and life itself becomes a burden too heavy to carry. In this state, the mind whispers lies so convincing that ending everything seems like the only escape. This is the raw face of hopelessness, where pain blinds you to possibility and suffering convinces you there is no other way forward. And yet, in the strangest twist, those who attempt to step away from life and survive often awaken to a reality they had never seen so clearly before. Suddenly, life, fragile, fleeting, and imperfect, takes on a new weight, a new beauty. This is the suicide survival paradox. The collision of death's nearness with life's value, the transformation of despair into a deeper love for existence. At the heart of this paradox lies a haunting question. How can the very pain that drives someone to the brink of death become the spark that reignites their desire to live? For many survivors, the act of surviving itself becomes a brutal wake-up call. The attempted goodbye forces them to realize what they were actually seeking. Not death itself, but the end of suffering. They did not want their life to end. They wanted the pain to stop. And when they wake on the other side of a survival, something changes. The very fact that they are still here becomes proof that life, however broken, still holds potential. What once felt unbearable becomes a reminder of resilience. Survivors often describe an almost shocking clarity in those final moments before an attempt. Memories flooding in, regrets echoing, unspoken words rising to the surface. It is in that razor-thin space between letting go and holding on that many discover a truth they had buried beneath layers of pain. Deep down, they did not want to die. They simply couldn't see another way to live with their suffering. This revelation, born from standing at death's edge, reshapes everything. Suddenly, the ordinary, sunlight spilling through a window, laughter shared with a friend, the warmth of a simple meal, feels extraordinary. Life, once heavy and unbearable, begins to glimmer with fragile beauty. And yet, the paradox is not clean or easy. Survival doesn't magically erase the pain that led someone there. The wounds remain, the struggles continue, and for many, the road back to hope is uneven and filled with setbacks. But the act of survival itself becomes proof of strength. It says, if I could survive this, I can survive more. The paradox teaches that despair and hope are not opposites but companions, tangled together in ways we rarely acknowledge. In the same heart that once carried the weight of giving up, the seed of resilience often waits quietly, ready to bloom in the aftermath. This paradox also reveals something deeply human, the ability to rediscover meaning after devastation. People who have come face to face with death often speak of living differently afterward. They stop taking small things for granted. They embrace vulnerability more openly. They live with a sense of urgency and gratitude because they have seen how fragile it all is. The very edge of destruction becomes the birthplace of a new kind of appreciation. What was once invisible now shines with sacred significance. But perhaps the most powerful lesson in the suicide survival paradox is not just about individual transformation, it's about how we see suffering itself. We often look at despair as the end of the story, as proof that hope is gone. Yet the paradox shows us that within despair lies the possibility for renewal. Pain does not always destroy. Sometimes it strips life bare, forcing us to rebuild from the ground up with deeper awareness. Survival turns suffering into a mirror, one that reflects both the depth of our vulnerability and the astonishing strength that comes from facing it. The paradox doesn't offer simple answers. It doesn't claim that every survivor will suddenly live joyfully, nor does it erase the darkness that brought them to the edge. Instead, it shows us the strange, heartbreaking beauty of resilience, that even in the shadow of death, the will to live can emerge stronger than ever. It is a reminder that despair is not final, that hope can be buried so deeply we mistake it for gone, and that life has a way of returning when we least expect it. So the suicide survival paradox leaves us with this truth. Within the very act of almost ending it all lies the chance to begin again. Survival transforms what was once unbearable into a reason to keep going. And in this paradox, we see the fragile, astonishing resilience of the human spirit, a spirit that, even at its lowest, can rediscover the strength to rise. The sacrifice paradox, to live for others, often means letting parts of yourself die. It sounds noble, even heroic. The idea of giving up your time, your energy, your dreams, so someone else can flourish. On the surface, sacrifice is praised as one of the highest virtues. We are taught that to give is to be good, that to put others first is the mark of true love and loyalty. But beneath this noble idea hides a tension, a quiet contradiction that is not so easily solved. This is the sacrifice paradox. The more of yourself you give away, the more you risk losing the very self that makes your giving possible. At first, sacrifice feels fulfilling. You skip a meal to help a friend in need, stay awake late into the night listening to someone's struggles, or push your own ambitions aside to support a loved one. In those moments, there is meaning. You feel useful, connected, even proud of your ability to bear the weight for someone else. But sacrifice has a hidden cost, one that builds slowly, almost invisibly. Piece by piece, the self that once had dreams, passions, and boundaries begins to erode. The small choices pile up. The time you didn't take for yourself, the dreams you left on the shelf, the voice you silenced for the sake of peace, until one day you look in the mirror and struggle to recognize who you've become. The paradox emerges here. In giving to others, you risk hollowing yourself out. What begins as an act of love can turn into quiet self-erasure, and often, the people you give the most to may not even realize the cost. They see your support, but they don't see the toll. They benefit from your sacrifice, but they do not always witness the dreams you buried to make room for theirs. Over time, the line between love and loss blurs. Are you giving out of devotion, or because you've forgotten how to live for yourself? But why is sacrifice so alluring, even when it threatens to consume us? Part of the answer lies in how society glorifies selflessness. From a young age, we are taught that the highest virtue is to put others before ourselves, that the more you give, the more valuable you are. To sacrifice is to prove your worth, to show your love, to demonstrate your moral strength. And yet, no one tells you what to do when the well runs dry. No one teaches you how to balance giving with preserving yourself. And so the paradox deepens. The more you give, the less you feel like yourself. And the less you feel like yourself, the more you think you must give to prove your value. This cycle is dangerous because it convinces you that pulling back is selfish, when in truth, pulling back might be the only way to save yourself. Sacrifice, when it becomes endless, doesn't just take your energy, it steals your identity. It leaves you fragmented, a ghost of yourself wandering in the lives of others. You cannot keep pouring endlessly without eventually running dry. And when you are empty, there is nothing left to give. Not love, not joy, not support. Yet the sacrifice paradox isn't a call to abandon giving. It isn't telling you to stop caring for others or to retreat into selfishness. Instead, it is an invitation to redefine what sacrifice means. True sacrifice is not about killing parts of yourself to keep others alive. It's about sharing your strength in ways that sustain both you and them. It's about learning to set boundaries, to say no when your soul is depleted, and to recognize that your dreams and desires matter too. Giving should come from abundance, not emptiness. Think of it like this. A candle can light other candles without losing its flame, but only if it still has wax to burn. If it burns itself out completely, there is nothing left to ignite the dark. In the same way, the greatest gift you can offer others is not a hollowed-out version of yourself, but a whole, vibrant, authentic self. Someone with energy, purpose, and joy to share. The sacrifice paradox forces us to confront one of life's hardest truths. Love cannot exist without balance. If you lose yourself entirely in the name of others, you don't just harm yourself, you harm them too, because what they truly need is not your self-destruction, but your presence, your strength, your wholeness. Sacrifice, at its best, builds bridges. At its worst, it burns them. In the end, this paradox challenges you to walk the fine line between selflessness and self-preservation, to give without erasing yourself, to care deeply for others while remembering that your life, your dreams, and your identity are worth protecting. Because only when you are whole can your giving be real. Only when you protect your flame can you light the way for someone else. The pain of happiness. Paradox, every laugh carries a shadow. Every moment of joy is tied silently to the possibility of sorrow. You may not notice it when you're lost in laughter, when your chest feels light, when love surrounds you, but somewhere, beneath the surface, there is always the quiet reminder, this moment will not last. This is the pain of happiness paradox. The deeper you allow yourself to feel joy, the more vulnerable you become to heartbreak. Happiness opens the door to love, to connection, to meaning. But it also opens the door to loss, to grief, to the aching reality that nothing gold can stay forever. Think back to the happiest moments of your life. Maybe it was falling in love, holding a child for the first time, or finally achieving something you worked for with all your strength. In those moments, life feels unshakable, limitless, and almost invincible. Yet, right there, within that very ecstasy, lies a shadow. What if it ends? What if you lose it? What if this fragile, breathtaking moment slips away, as it inevitably will? The higher you climb on the ladder of happiness, the greater the fall when it ends. And that is the paradox. The more you treasure joy, the more you risk pain. Happiness is fragile because it is fleeting. It cannot be held in place, no matter how tightly you grip it. The nature of joy is impermanence. A laugh fades into silence. A kiss lingers, then ends. The warmth of a perfect day becomes only a memory. And yet, this impermanence is what gives happiness its brilliance. If it lasted forever, it would lose its sharpness. The sunset is beautiful, not because it lasts, but because it ends. Joy cuts so deeply because it reminds us of life's fragility. But here is where the paradox deepens. It's not just that happiness is temporary, it's that happiness itself makes you vulnerable. To love is to risk heartbreak. To succeed is to risk failure later. To laugh is to risk tears tomorrow. The things that bring the most joy are also the things that carry the potential for the greatest sorrow. To open your heart is to hand someone the power to break it. To build dreams is to give life the chance to shatter them. Joy and pain are not separate forces. They are twins, born from the same source. You cannot feel one without opening yourself to the other. So why, knowing this, do we still chase happiness? Why do we let ourselves fall in love, pursue dreams, embrace moments of joy, when we know each one carries the weight of possible loss? The answer is simple, yet profound. Because the alternative is worse. To live without joy is to live without meaning. A life without happiness may feel safer, but it is hollow. To protect yourself from pain by refusing to feel joy is to rob yourself of what makes life worth living, the pain of happiness. Paradox forces us to face this uncomfortable truth. Pain is the price of joy, but it is a price worth paying. The paradox also challenges the way we view vulnerability. Many of us try to avoid happiness because we fear the hurt that might follow. We hesitate to love deeply because we dread heartbreak. We hold back from chasing dreams because we fear failure. But in doing so, we miss the point. Vulnerability is not weakness. Vulnerability is proof that you are alive. The pain that comes with joy is not a flaw. It is evidence that you cared, that you loved, that you lived fully. Without the risk of sorrow, joy would have no depth. And yet, the paradox carries a gift. The fleeting nature of happiness doesn't make it meaningless. It makes it precious. The shadow of sorrow doesn't diminish joy. It intensifies it. Knowing that a moment will end makes you savor it more deeply while it lasts. The bittersweet truth is that the beauty of joy lies in its impermanence. The tears that follow are not signs of weakness, but proof of how deeply it mattered. So, how do you live with the pain of happiness paradox? By embracing it, by stepping into joy fully, even when you know it will not last, by letting yourself love, laugh, and chase dreams, not in spite of the pain they might bring, but because that very pain proves how real they are. Life will always carry both joy and sorrow. You cannot separate them, and you shouldn't try. In the end, the pain of happiness paradox teaches us the ultimate lesson. Happiness and sorrow are not enemies, but companions. The brighter the joy, the deeper the shadow. But it is only because the shadow exists that the light shines so brilliantly. Every laugh, every kiss, every fleeting moment of happiness is worth the risk of pain. Because the pain fades, but the memory of joy remains, etched into the soul as proof that you lived. The paradox of truth. Truth is supposed to be solid. It is supposed to be the anchor you cling to in the storm, the foundation on which you build your life, the certainty that gives you stability when everything else feels chaotic. We are told that truth is absolute, unshakable, something that can be discovered and then trusted without question. Yet the more you cling to truth, the more you discover its fragile, shifting nature. This is the paradox of truth. The more certain you are that you have found it, the more likely you are blind to what you do not see. Certainty does not expand understanding, it narrows it. The moment you believe you hold the ultimate truth, you stop searching for it, and in that act, you move further away from it. Certainty feels safe. It gives you comfort in a world that constantly changes. To say, "This is the truth," feels like control. It silences doubt and creates the illusion of clarity. But here is the hidden danger. When you are convinced you already know the truth, you close the door to alternative perspectives. You filter out information that doesn't align with what you already believe. You build walls around your mind, walls made not of wisdom, but of stubbornness, and those walls become a prison. You are not protecting the truth, you are protecting your ego. Think about your strongest beliefs, the ones you hold closest to your heart. Maybe it's about morality, about how the world works, or even about who you are. How often do you question those beliefs? How often do you invite yourself to consider that you might be wrong? If the answer is rarely, then you've already fallen into the trap of the paradox. The more confident you are in your truth, the more blind you may be to its flaws. The very strength of your conviction may be the weakness that keeps you from deeper understanding. The paradox of truth reveals itself most clearly in conflict. When someone challenges what you believe, how do you respond? Do you truly listen, or do you defend? Most people instinctively defend, as if admitting doubt would destroy them. But this defensiveness does not come from strength. It comes from fear. Deep down, we know our truths might not hold up under scrutiny, and that terrifies us. So, we hold tighter, even as the cracks grow wider. In this way, certainty does not protect us. It blinds us. And here lies the irony. Truth is not static. It is not a destination you arrive at and then rest. Truth is a process, a journey, a constant unfolding. The wisest people in history, philosophers, scientists, spiritual teachers, are not the ones who claim to have all the answers. They are the ones who admitted how little they knew. Socrates famously said, "I know that I know nothing." That was not weakness, it was wisdom. To embrace doubt is not to abandon truth, but to deepen your relationship with it. The paradox of truth challenges you to let go of the obsession with certainty. It asks you to live with humility, to hold your beliefs lightly, and to question often. This doesn't mean truth doesn't exist. It doesn't mean that all opinions are equal or that reality is meaningless. Instead, it means that truth is vast and layered, too complex to ever be fully grasped by a single perspective. What you see is always a fragment of the whole. The more curious you remain, the closer you come to understanding. The more certain you become, the further you drift into blindness. But here's the hardest part. Living with this paradox is uncomfortable. Certainty is easy, doubt is heavy. Certainty gives you a sense of control. Doubt demands humility. Certainty makes you feel strong. Doubt forces you to be vulnerable. And yet, only through doubt can growth happen. Only through questioning can wisdom emerge. If you cling to the elusive, on a final truth, you stop evolving. But if you accept that truth is always unfolding, you keep learning, keep expanding, keep becoming.
The paradox of truth is not meant to strip you of all conviction. It is not a call to nihilism, nor is it an excuse to drift aimlessly without belief. It is a call to balance, to believe, but to question, to commit, but to remain open, to recognize that truth is not something you own. It is something you explore. In the end, the paradox of truth teaches you that wisdom does not come from certainty. It comes from humility. It comes from the courage to admit you might be wrong and the openness to keep searching. Truth is not a treasure you lock away. It is a river you step into again and again, and the moment you think you have bottled it, you've already lost it. The courage paradox. When people imagine courage, they often picture someone standing tall, unshaken, unafraid in the face of danger. A soldier running into battle, a firefighter charging into flames, or a leader defying the odds with unbreakable resolve. Courage, we are told, is the absence of fear. But the truth is very different, and far more powerful. Courage does not exist without fear. It is born from fear, shaped by it, defined by it. Without fear, there is nothing to overcome, no risk to take, no reason to summon bravery. This is the courage paradox. The very thing you think you must eliminate to be brave, fear, is the very thing that makes courage possible. Imagine standing at the edge of a cliff. The wind howls in your ears, your heart races, and your body screams at you to step back. Fear grips you like iron, reminding you of your fragility. Now imagine you take a step forward anyway, not because the fear is gone, but because you have decided that something matters more than your fear. That is courage, not fearlessness, but action in spite of fear. The paradox flips the definition of bravery. The presence of fear is not a weakness. It is the proof that you are alive, standing at the threshold of something that matters. Fear is not your enemy. Fear is a messenger. It tells you what you care about. The fear of failure reveals your dreams. The fear of rejection shows how much relationships matter to you. The fear of the unknown proves that safety and security are deeply valuable to you. Fear exists only in the spaces where something important is at stake. If you felt nothing, there would be no fear, but there would also be no reason to be courageous. In that sense, fear is the raw material out of which courage is carved. And yet, most people see fear as a barrier. We tell ourselves, I'll act once I'm no longer afraid, but that moment never comes because... And here lies the beauty of the paradox. Once you act in the presence of fear, something shifts. The fear that once felt overwhelming begins to shrink. It does not disappear completely, but it loses its grip. Each act of courage teaches you that you are stronger than you thought, more capable than you believed. Fear may knock at your door again tomorrow, but you will recognize it for what it is. Not a prison, but an invitation. In the end, the courage paradox teaches us that bravery is not about being fearless. It is about embracing fear as a companion on the journey. It is about understanding that the trembling hands, the racing heart, and the uncertain voice are not signs of weakness. They are the proof of courage in motion. Fear is not the opposite of courage. Fear is the soil in which courage grows. Without it, bravery has no meaning. So, the next time fear rises within you, don't wait for it to leave. Don't mistake its presence as proof that you are weak. Instead, recognize it as the beginning of something greater. Let it sharpen your senses, remind you of what matters, and call forth the courage that already lives within you. Because the paradox is simple but profound, courage is not the absence of fear, it is the triumph over it. The paradox of control. We spend our lives trying to control everything: our schedules, our relationships, our careers, our emotions, even our futures. Control feels like safety. It gives us the illusion that if we plan carefully enough, work hard enough, or hold on tightly enough, nothing will slip away. But life always proves otherwise. The unexpected arrives, plans collapse, people leave. The things we fought so hard to control break free from our grip, and in those moments, the truth is revealed. The harder you try to control everything, the less control you actually have. This is the paradox of control, that real strength comes not from clinging tightly, but from learning how to let go. Think about water cupped in your hands. The tighter you squeeze, the faster it slips through your fingers. Control works the same way. The more you obsess over holding on, the more you lose the very thing you're trying to keep. Relationships crumble under suffocation. Dreams die under perfectionism. Peace vanishes when every moment is micromanaged. Control feels like power, but in reality, it often becomes the very thing that steals it away. This paradox is everywhere in human life. A leader who tries to control every detail loses the trust of their team. A parent who tries to control every step of their child's life ends up pushing that child away. An individual who tries to control every outcome in their career often burns out before they reach their goals. In trying to force life to bend to their will, they forget that life is not something to be mastered like a machine. It is unpredictable, alive, and always changing. The harder you resist its flow, the more it resists you back. But the paradox of control isn't saying we should give up all responsibility. It's not telling us to drift through life with no direction, no discipline, no effort. What it reveals is a deeper truth. The paradox of control teaches you that true mastery of life comes not from grasping at it, but from learning how to dance with it. The most powerful people are not those who control every variable. They are those who know how to remain steady when nothing goes as planned. They are the ones who can adapt, adjust, and find peace in the storm. In the end, the paradox offers freedom. You will never control everything, and the sooner you accept that, the lighter you become. You stop wasting energy on the impossible and start investing it where it matters. You stop trying to force life into a straight line and begin embracing the beauty of its curves and twists. Control, when clung to, imprisons you. But when you learn to release it, you find the very freedom you were searching for all along. The paradox of success. Everyone wants success. From childhood, we are told to chase it, to dream of it, to build our lives around achieving it. Success is painted as the destination that will bring happiness, fulfillment, and peace. We imagine that once we arrive, once we reach the dream job, the wealth, the recognition, or the status we've been striving for, everything will finally fall into place. But when people reach success, something strange often happens. Instead of peace, they feel emptiness. Instead of happiness, they feel pressure. Instead of fulfillment, they find themselves asking, is this all there is? This is the paradox of success. The very thing you chase believing it will satisfy you often creates new burdens, new fears, and even deeper dissatisfaction. At first, success feels incredible. The applause is loud, the recognition is intoxicating, and the sense of achievement fills you with pride. But as the echo fades, a new weight sets in, the pressure to keep it. Success does not just give you something. It takes something too. It takes your ease. It takes your freedom. It takes the innocence of striving without being watched. Once you succeed, eyes turn to you. Expectations grow, competitors emerge, and the higher you climb, the further there is to fall. What once motivated you becomes a source of fear. You no longer ask, how do I achieve? But what if I lose it? This paradox reveals a painful truth. Success often creates more anxiety than failure. Failure is painful, but it's clear. You know where you stand, you know what didn't work, and you know how to try again. Success, on the other hand, is slippery. It raises questions with no easy answers. How long can I stay here? What will people think if I fall? Was it luck or was it me? Am I enough without this title, this money, this recognition? Instead of satisfaction, success often breeds ins. So how do you live with this paradox? By redefining success itself. Instead of measuring it by status, wealth, or recognition, measure it by growth, impact, and authenticity. Did you become a better version of yourself in the process? Did you create something that matters? Did you live in alignment with who you are? If the answer is yes, then that is success, regardless of applause or trophies. The paradox also challenges you to detach your identity from your achievements. You are not your job title. You are not the money in your bank account. You are not the recognition you receive. These things can be stripped away in an instant, and if they define you, then you will crumble when they are gone. True success is carrying a sense of worth that cannot be taken from you, because it is rooted in your character, your values, and your willingness to grow. In the end, the paradox of success teaches a liberating truth. Success will never complete you, but it can reveal you. It will expose your insecurities, magnify your fears, and test your resilience. It can enslave you if you cling to it, or it can free you if you see it for what it is, a temporary milestone, not a final destination. The true measure of success is not how high you climb, but how deeply you live, how authentically you love, and how courageously you grow along the way. The love paradox. Love is the most desired and the most feared of all human experiences. From the moment we are born, we crave connection. We long to be seen, to be held, to be chosen. Love promises warmth, meaning, and a sense of belonging that nothing else can match. And yet hidden inside love is a razor's edge. The deeper you love, the more vulnerable you become. To open your heart fully is to hand someone else the power to break it. This is the love paradox, that the very thing which brings the greatest joy also carries the potential for the deepest pain. Love feels like freedom, yet it also binds. It feels like wholeness, yet it reveals our deepest wounds. When you love someone, you are no longer just yourself. Part of you now lives in them. Their happiness becomes your happiness. Their pain becomes your pain. And while this creates intimacy, it also creates risk. The stronger the bond, the more fragile you feel, because the thought of losing it becomes unbearable. Love makes life brighter, but it also makes the shadows darker. This paradox is everywhere. Think of a parent's love for their child. The love is fierce, unconditional, almost primal, but that same love makes them vulnerable to unbearable fear, fear of harm, fear of loss, fear of failure. To love deeply is to live in constant awareness that something precious could be taken away at any moment. Or think of romantic love. At first, it feels intoxicating, like discovering a missing piece of yourself. But with intimacy comes exposure. Suddenly, your insecurities rise to the surface. The fear of rejection, betrayal, or abandonment grows stronger, precisely because you care so deeply. Love uncovers not just your strengths, but your fragility. And yet, here lies the mystery. Despite its risks, we continue to choose love. We continue to open our hearts again and again, even after heartbreak. Why? Because the love paradox teaches us that love is not about avoiding pain, but about embracing it as part of the journey. To love is to risk, to hurt, to sometimes lose, but also to live fully, to connect deeply,
and to experience the richness of being human. Pain does not make love weaker, it makes it real. The cracks left by heartbreak do not erase love's value. They prove how much it mattered. In the end, the paradox reminds us of this simple truth. Love is not safe, and it never will be. But it is worth it. The very vulnerability that terrifies us is also what makes love so profound. You cannot have one without the other. Love is the greatest risk and the greatest reward. And it is in that paradox that life finds its deepest meaning. The freedom paradox. Freedom is the dream of every human heart. We long to live without chains, without restrictions, without anyone telling us who we must be or how we must live. We imagine freedom as the ultimate form of happiness, the power to choose, to move, to create, to shape our lives exactly as we wish. And yet, when people finally taste absolute freedom, something unexpected often happens. Instead of peace, they feel lost. Instead of joy, they feel anxious. Instead of clarity, they feel burdened. This is the freedom paradox, that the more freedom you have, the heavier it becomes, because choice without direction can paralyze, and unlimited options can leave you emptier than rules ever did. At first glance, freedom feels intoxicating. Think of a young adult leaving home for the first time, finally free from the rules of parents or teachers. Suddenly, they can stay up as late as they want, eat whatever they please, spend their time however they choose. But within weeks, freedom begins to feel less like liberation and more like chaos. Without structure, the days blur together. Without responsibility, the joy of independence becomes aimlessness. Freedom, without guidance, quickly transforms from empowerment to confusion. This paradox lives within all of us. We crave autonomy, but we also crave stability. We want to be free to choose, yet we feel comfort when some choices are made for us. Too many rules suffocate us, but too few leave us overwhelmed. Psychologists call this the paradox of choice. When options multiply, satisfaction declines. The more paths you could take, the more you doubt the one you've chosen. Freedom, instead of empowering you, creates a gnawing anxiety. What if I chose wrong? What if there was a better path? What if I waste my life? And so, freedom reveals its hidden truth. It is not the absence of limits that makes life meaningful, but to he's right limits. A musician is free to play any note, but true beauty comes when they choose a scale. An artist is free to use any color, but real art requires composition and focus. A life without boundaries becomes noise. A life with chosen boundaries becomes music. The paradox of freedom is that boundaries, rather than destroying freedom, often give it its deepest meaning. Yet, the paradox cuts deeper still. With freedom comes responsibility. Every choice you make is yours, and with that comes accountability. You cannot blame parents, teachers, or society forever. Freedom removes excuses. If you succeed, it's because you chose wisely. If you fail, the same is true. That responsibility is both empowering and terrifying. It is why many people, consciously or unconsciously, run from freedom, hiding behind authority, tradition, or routine, because the burden of deciding for themselves feels too heavy. But true freedom is not about having no limits at all. It is about consciously choosing which limits you will live by. Discipline, for example, looks like restriction, but it actually creates freedom. The athlete who disciplines their body is free to perform at levels others can't. The writer who disciplines their craft is free to express truth in ways others can't. The individual who disciplines their mind is free to remain steady in chaos where others crumble. Freedom without discipline is emptiness. Discipline within freedom is mastery. The freedom paradox also teaches us something about desire. Many people believe freedom means doing whatever you feel in the moment. But if you are enslaved by impulse, by cravings, addictions, emotions, are you truly free? Or are you merely a servant to your desires? Real freedom is not found in obeying every urge, but in mastering them. It is the ability to choose not just what you want now, but what will serve you in the long run. Sometimes the most powerful expression of freedom is the ability to say no. In the end, the freedom paradox reveals that freedom is not simply about escape. It is about creation. It is not about being unbound by all rules, but about choosing the rules that align with your values, your purpose, your truth. Too little freedom crushes the spirit, but too much freedom without guidance drowns it. The balance lies in finding the structure that allows your freedom to flourish.
And so the paradox leaves us with this lesson. Freedom is not about having everything, but about choosing wisely among the infinite. It is not about avoiding responsibility, but embracing it. True freedom is not the absence of limits. It is the courage to shape your own. The knowledge paradox. From childhood, we are taught that knowledge is power. The more you learn, the stronger you become. Education, wisdom, facts, and understanding. These are the tools that can open doors, elevate your life, and protect you from mistakes. And this is true, but only partly, for there is a hidden side to knowledge that no one tells you about. The deeper you go, the more you realize how little you truly know. Knowledge does not just illuminate, it also humbles. This is the knowledge paradox. The more certain you are that you understand the world, the more you discover how vast, mysterious, and unknowable it really is. At first, learning feels empowering. A child learns the names of colors, the shape of numbers, the rules of language. They feel smart, capable, confident. As they grow, knowledge expands further. Science explains the stars. History explains nations. Psychology explains minds. Each new layer feels like mastery, as if the world is becoming smaller, more understandable, more under control. But then something happens. The deeper you go into any subject, the more complexity you uncover. Every answer creates new questions. Every discovery exposes deeper mysteries. Instead of shrinking, the world expands endlessly. And with that expansion comes humility, the realization that your knowledge is a single drop in an ocean you can never fully drink. The paradox appears here. The most ignorant people often feel the most certain, while the wisest people are filled with doubt. Those who know little believe they know everything. Those who know much understand how much is left unknown. This is why Socrates declared, "I know that I know nothing." It was not a confession of stupidity, but an expression of wisdom. To know your limits is the beginning of true understanding. This paradox touches every aspect of life. In science, breakthroughs often reveal more mystery than they solve. In relationships, the more you think you know someone, the more you realize they contain entire worlds you will never fully understand. In self-awareness, the closer you look inward, the more you uncover hidden layers, contradictions, and complexities you never imagined. Knowledge expands, but certainty shrinks. And yet, we resist this truth. We want knowledge to give us control. We want it to give us final answers, to silence uncertainty. But knowledge does the opposite. It destabilizes. It reminds us that certainty is an illusion, that life is not a puzzle to be solved, but a mystery to be lived. The paradox is that while knowledge removes ignorance, it also removes arrogance. It strips away the illusion of mastery and replaces it with humility, with awe, with reverence for how much lies beyond human grasp. But there is also freedom in this paradox. When you accept that knowledge is endless, you stop trying to arrive at final answers and start embracing the journey of learning itself. You no longer study to finish, but to grow. You no longer seek to dominate truth, but to engage with it. Each new piece of knowledge becomes not an endpoint, but a doorway. The pursuit itself becomes the meaning. The knowledge paradox also has a warning. Knowledge without wisdom can be dangerous. Information without humility can be weaponized, used to control, manipulate, or destroy. History is filled with examples of people who believed they knew enough to justify cruelty, exploitation, or destruction. This is why the paradox matters. Knowledge must be paired with awareness of its limits. Without that humility, it becomes arrogance. With humility, it becomes wisdom. And so, the paradox challenges you to remain a lifelong learner, to never let certainty stop curiosity, to understand that being wrong is not failure, but part of the path, that admitting you don't know is not weakness, but strength, because in the end, true power does not come from the illusion of knowing everything, but from the courage to keep exploring, questioning, and growing. In the end, the knowledge paradox teaches this. The more you learn, the more you realize how infinite truth really is. Knowledge expands your vision, but it also expands your humility. And it is in that humility, in that endless hunger to learn, that wisdom is born. The effort paradox. From a young age, we are told that effort is the key to success. Work hard, push forward, grind, and you will eventually achieve your dreams. The message is clear. The more effort you put in, the greater the reward, and often this is true. But life also holds a strange twist. Sometimes the harder you push, the further the goal seems to move away. Sometimes the more effort you exert, the less progress you make. There are moments when letting go, relaxing, or stepping back accomplishes more than endless struggle. This is the effort paradox, that while effort is necessary for growth, excessive effort can become the very thing that sabotages you. Think about sleep. The harder you try to fall asleep, the more awake you become. Or think about creativity. The more you strain to force inspiration, the more your mind feels blocked. In relationships, the harder you try to force connection, the more artificial it feels. Effort matters, but beyond a certain point, it flips against you. It becomes tension, resistance, and strain, the very enemies of flow. What once brought you closer to success now pushes it further away. This paradox lives in countless areas of life. In sports, athletes who overtrain burn out, injure themselves, or plateau in performance. In academics, students who obsessively cram may retain less than those who study calmly and consistently. In careers, people who work endlessly without pause often collapse into exhaustion, losing clarity and creativity along the way. The harder they push, the more they sink. Life has a way of punishing imbalance, even when it comes from good intentions. The effort paradox reveals an uncomfortable truth. Effort must be balanced with surrender. To achieve great things, yes, you must work hard, but you must also know when to rest, when to step back, when to release control. Growth is not only about pushing forward. It is about allowing space for results to emerge naturally. Just as a seed cannot be forced to sprout by pulling at it, success cannot always be forced by sheer intensity. Sometimes the most powerful move is patience. Yet the paradox is not a rejection of hard work. Without effort, nothing meaningful can be built. Discipline, persistence, and resilience are essential. But the paradox shows that effort must be intelligent, not blind. It is not about throwing more energy at the wall. It is about channeling it wisely. Effort without balance becomes wasted motion. Effort with awareness becomes unstoppable progress. Think of a river. If you swim frantically against the current, you exhaust yourself and go nowhere. But if you align with its flow, if you pace yourself, if you use its energy instead of resisting it, you move further with less strain. Life works the same way. When effort aligns with flow, it feels almost effortless. When effort fights against reality, it drains you. The effort paradox also applies to self-growth. Many people try to force themselves into becoming better, forcing discipline, forcing positivity, forcing healing. But real transformation does not come from force. It comes from consistent practice, patience, and gentleness with yourself. Just as muscles need rest to grow stronger, the soul needs moments of ease to expand. Pushing too hard against yourself often creates resistance instead of progress. In the end, the paradox asks you to master balance, to know when to push and when to pause, to recognize that rest is not laziness, but strategy, to understand that stepping back is not giving up, but allowing space for clarity, inspiration, and renewal. The greatest breakthroughs often come not in moments of strain, but in moments of stillness, when the mind is relaxed, open, and ready to receive. The effort paradox teaches us that life is not a battle of constant struggle, but a dance of persistence and surrender. Hard work builds momentum, but surrender creates flow. Together, they create harmony. Alone, they create collapse. So, remember this: effort is necessary, but effort alone is not enough. To succeed, you must also learn the art of letting go. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is stop pushing and simply allow. The paradox of forgiveness. Forgiveness is one of the most misunderstood human experiences. On the surface, it looks simple. Someone hurts you, you let it go, and you move on. But in reality, forgiveness is far more complicated, far more difficult, and far more powerful than it first appears. To forgive is to release resentment, to let go of the anger that chains you to the past. And yet, here is where the paradox emerges. Forgiveness feels like weakness, but it is strength. It feels like surrender, but it is freedom. It feels like giving a gift to the person who hurt you, but in truth, it is a gift you give yourself. This is the paradox of forgiveness. The act that feels hardest to do is often the only path to peace. At first, forgiveness feels impossible. The wound is raw, the betrayal sharp, the memory unshakable. Your mind replays the moment again and again, each time adding layers of pain and bitterness. Anger becomes your shield, resentment your armor. To forgive feels like letting the other person win, as if releasing them from guilt somehow erases the wrong they committed. You tell yourself, if I forgive, I'm excusing what they did. But the paradox reveals otherwise. Forgiveness is not about excusing, condoning, or forgetting. It is about reclaiming your own peace. Resentment is heavy. It eats away at you quietly, poisoning your thoughts, draining your energy, tightening its grip every time you recall the wound. The person who hurt you may move on with their life, but you remain bound to the moment, chained to the past. Forgiveness does not erase the memory, but it breaks the chain. It is the act of saying, I will no longer allow this wound to control my present. Paradoxically, you free yourself not by holding tighter to anger, but by letting it go. Yet, this paradox is difficult because anger feels like strength. It feels protective. It gives you a sense of justice, of standing firm. But in truth, anger sustained over time weakens you. It consumes your inner peace, blinds your perspective, and blocks healing. Forgiveness, on the other hand, feels vulnerable. It feels as though you are opening yourself to harm again. But this is the hidden strength. It takes far more courage to release than to hold on. Anyone can cling to bitterness. Only the strong can forgive. The paradox of forgiveness also reveals another truth. Forgiveness is not always for reconciliation. Sometimes the person who hurt you is gone, unwilling to change, or unsafe to let back into your life. Forgiving them does not mean inviting them in again. Forgiveness is not about repairing the relationship. It is about repairing yourself. It is the decision to no longer let their actions define your state of mind. You may forgive and walk away forever, and that act may be the deepest expression of freedom. But the paradox runs even deeper. Forgiveness is not only about others, it is about yourself. Self-forgiveness may be the hardest of all. We carry shame, regret, and guilt for years, punishing ourselves long after others have forgiven us. We replay mistakes until they define our identity. To forgive yourself feels selfish, as if you are excusing your flaws. But once again, the paradox reveals that self-forgiveness is not weakness. It is the foundation of growth. Only when you release shame can you learn, evolve, and move forward. Without it, you remain frozen in a cycle of self-punishment. Forgiveness, then, is not a single act, but a process, sometimes long, sometimes painful, always transformative. It may need to be repeated again and again, until the grip of anger finally loosens. It is not about forgetting, but about remembering differently, with wisdom instead of bitterness, with strength instead of weakness. In the end, the paradox of forgiveness teaches us that forgiveness is not about them, it is about you. It is not about erasing the past, but about freeing your future. It is not about weakness, but about the strength to release what poisons you. It is the act of choosing peace over pain, healing over hatred, freedom over chains. So, when forgiveness feels like the hardest thing to do, remember the paradox. That difficulty is the very sign of its power. And when you finally find the courage to forgive, whether others or yourself, you will discover that what once felt like surrender was, in truth, the deepest victory. The weakness-strength paradox: we live in a world that glorifies strength. From childhood, we are told to be tough, to hide our tears, to stand firm, to never show weakness. Strength is seen as power, and weakness as failure. But hidden within this belief is one of life's greatest illusions. True strength is not found in the absence of weakness. It is revealed through it. The ability to admit vulnerability, to expose your scars, to lean on others when you cannot stand alone, is not weakness at all. It is courage in its purest form. This is the weakness-strength paradox. The strange truth that the very things we consider fragile are often the foundations of our deepest power. At first, weakness feels dangerous. To admit you're afraid, to say, I don't know, to confess your pain, it feels like handing the world a weapon that could be used against you. That fear drives people to hide behind masks of strength, the forced smile, the rigid posture, the silence about what hurts. But beneath the mask, the suffering grows. Pretending to be strong may protect your image, but it does not heal your soul. And paradoxically,
It is the act of revealing your weakness that begins the process of true healing and growth. Think of relationships. The strongest bonds are not built on perfection, but on vulnerability. Two people become close not by showing their best selves, but by daring to reveal their fears, flaws, and wounds. To say, "I am struggling," invites connection. To say, "I need you," builds trust. What looks like weakness is, in truth, the strength to be real. Without vulnerability, relationships stay shallow. With it, they deepen beyond measure. The paradox also lives in personal growth. Strength is not built by denying weakness, but by confronting it. The athlete becomes stronger not by pretending their body never tires, but by pushing through limits and training the weaker part. The student becomes wiser not by avoiding mistakes, but by facing them and learning. The leader becomes greater not by projecting invincibility, but by admitting uncertainty and inspiring others through honesty. Weakness, when faced with courage, transforms into resilience. And yet, society teaches us the opposite. We admire the unbreakable hero, the flawless performer, the stoic leader. But the truth is, unbreakable things often shatter when they finally do crack. It is the flexible, the vulnerable, the open, like bamboo swaying in the storm, that endures. Real strength is not rigidity, but adaptability. And adaptability requires the humility to admit weakness. The weakness-strength paradox also reveals itself in suffering, pain, loss, heartbreak. These break us open. In the moment, we feel fragile, powerless, undone, but with time, those very cracks become sources of wisdom, empathy, and compassion. The people who inspire us most are not those who never struggled, but those who were broken and chose to rise again. Their strength came not in spite of their weakness, but because of it. This paradox challenges everything we are taught about power. It shows us that admitting weakness is not giving up. It is stepping into authenticity, that asking for help is not dependence. It is the courage to acknowledge your humanity. That crying is not failure. It is the release that makes healing possible. Weakness does not diminish strength. It reveals its foundation. In the end, the weakness-strength paradox teaches us that strength is not the mask you wear, but the truth you reveal. It is not the ability to avoid pain, but the willingness to walk through it. It is not in pretending you are unshakable, but in rising each time you fall. Weakness is not the opposite of strength. It is the doorway to it. So the next time you feel weak, remember, this too is part of your strength. Every tear, every doubt, every crack in your armor is proof that you are human, alive, and capable of growth. Do not hide it. Do not bury it. Embrace it. Because in the end, your greatest strength will not be that you never broke, but that you broke and still chose to rise.
The selfish-selflessness paradox. From the outside, selfishness and selflessness appear to be opposites. One is about taking, the other about giving. One is about prioritizing yourself, the other about prioritizing others. We are taught to avoid selfishness and to admire selflessness, as though the two cannot coexist. But the deeper you look, the more you realize they are bound together in ways most people overlook. Sometimes acts of giving are motivated by hidden self-interest. Sometimes prioritizing yourself becomes the greatest gift you can give others. This is the selfish-selflessness paradox, the strange truth that selfishness and selflessness are not enemies, but two sides of the same coin. On the surface, selflessness looks pure. You sacrifice your time, energy, or resources to help others. You serve, you give, you place their needs above your own. But even here, a subtle form of selfishness often lives. Helping others makes you feel good. It gives you purpose, a sense of worth, sometimes even admiration from others. True generosity doesn't erase the fact that the giver also benefits, whether through inner satisfaction, personal meaning, or social recognition. Even when your heart is pure, selflessness is rarely free from some element of self-doubt, and yet, the paradox runs both ways. What about selfishness? Taking care of yourself, setting boundaries, saying no. These often look selfish to the world, but in truth, they can be the most selfless acts you ever commit. When you protect your energy, you prevent burnout. When you prioritize your mental health, you preserve your capacity to support others. When you choose to grow, to heal, to strengthen yourself, you become someone who can give more fully, more authentically, and more sustainably.
Sometimes the greatest act of service to others begins with the courage to serve yourself first. Think of an airplane emerge. But the paradox also warns us. Unchecked selfishness can consume everything, while unchecked selflessness can destroy you. To live only for yourself isolates you from meaning. To live only for others empties you of identity. True balance lies in the middle, a harmony where caring for yourself empowers you to care for others, and where caring for others nourishes your own sense of purpose. In the end, the selfish selflessness paradox reveals that the line between giving and taking is never clear-cut. To love others, you must also love yourself. To give authentically, you must also receive. To serve without resentment, you must also protect your boundaries. Selfishness and selflessness are not enemies but dance partners, each incomplete without the other. The next time you are torn between your needs and the needs of others, remember, the two are not as separate as they seem. By choosing wisely, you can create a life where what fills you also flows outward, where your selfishness becomes the very thing that makes your selflessness possible. The time paradox. Time is the most precious resource we will ever have, yet it is also the one we understand the least. It governs every heartbeat, every sunrise, every season of our lives, yet it constantly slips through our fingers, impossible to grasp or control. The more we focus on time, the faster it seems to disappear. The more we try to save it, the more we feel we've wasted it. And when we ignore it, it silently runs away from us all the same. This is the time paradox. The strange truth that the very thing we try to master is the one thing we can never truly hold. From the moment we are born, time becomes our silent companion. As children, it feels infinite. Summers stretch on forever. Days are filled with wonder, and waiting a week feels like waiting a lifetime. But as we grow older, the pace changes. Years begin to blur, and life accelerates in ways we cannot explain. What once felt endless now feels fleeting. A decade passes in the blink of an eye, and the paradox deepens. The older we get, the more valuable time becomes, but the faster it seems to vanish. This paradox shapes how we live. We are constantly torn between the past, the present, and the future. The past traps us in regret, replaying mistakes we cannot undo. The future chains us to anxiety, worrying about what has not yet arrived. And in both cases, the present, the only time we truly own, slips by unnoticed. We waste hours dreaming of a tomorrow we may never see, while neglecting the beauty of the moment right in front of us. The paradox is cruel. By clinging to time, we lose it. By letting go of time, we begin to truly experience it. Think about how we approach productivity. We race against the clock, trying to save time, cut corners, and move faster. Yet often, the more we rush, the more mistakes we make. The more we try to buy time with speed, the less time we actually gain. Or think Abby. In the end, the time paradox teaches us that time is not measured by clocks but by presence. It is not about how many years you live, but how deeply you live within them. A single moment of true connection, gratitude, or joy can outweigh months of routine. Time cannot be stopped, but it can be savored. It cannot be controlled, but it can be honored. So, the paradox leaves us with this challenge. Don't wait for time to give you meaning. Give meaning to the time you already have. Because one day, you will look back and realize that the moments you thought were ordinary were, in fact, extraordinary. And the real tragedy is not that time runs out. It's that we forget to live while we still have it. The paradox of control and chaos. Human beings are wired to seek control. We crave order, predictability, and stability. We want life to follow a plan, to unfold according to our efforts, to reward discipline and punish disorder. Control gives us the illusion of safety, the belief that if we do everything right, things will go the way we want. But life, in its rawest form, is unpredictable. Storms appear without warning, plans crumble, accidents happen, people change, and chaos always finds its way in. And here lies the paradox of control and chaos. The harder we try to control everything, the more powerless we feel, while surrendering to chaos often reveals the only form of control we ever truly had. At first, control feels like power. We schedule our days, we set our goals, we plan our futures, we build routines, rules, and boundaries to give ourselves structure. And to some extent, this works. Life becomes manageable, less frightening. But beneath that order is a fragile reality. All it takes is one unexpected event,
a loss, a failure, a global crisis, an illness, to shatter it all. Suddenly, the control you clung to slips through your fingers, and you are left face to face with chaos. The paradox emerges when we realize that trying to control chaos directly only makes it worse. The more we resist uncertainty, the more anxious we become. The more we try to force life into perfect order, the more cracks appear in our plans. We cannot stop chaos from arriving, but we can decide how to meet it. And here lies the secret. Control is not about eliminating chaos, but about finding stability within it. Think of a surfer riding a wave. They cannot control the ocean. The water is vast, powerful, and unpredictable. If they fight against it, they will drown. But if they learn to balance, to flow with the wave while adjusting their stance, they find control, not over the ocean itself, but over themselves within it. Life works the same way. Chaos is the ocean, endless and wild. You cannot control it, but you can control how you respond, how you adapt, how you choose to ride its waves. This paradox touches every part of life. In relationships, you cannot control how others feel or behave, no matter how hard you try. You can only control your honesty, your boundaries, and your choices. In careers, you cannot control the economy, the market, or every twist of fate. You can only control your effort, your resilience, and your willingness to pivot. In health, you cannot control every outcome, but you can control your habits, your mindset, and how you care for your body. Chaos is always bigger than you, but your response within chaos is always yours. The paradox of control and chaos also reveals something profound about freedom. When you stop trying to control what you cannot, you discover a strange sense of liberation. The weight of perfection, the fear of failure, the pressure to predict everything. It begins to fall away. By surrendering to what is beyond you, you reclaim what is within you. True control is not about domination, it is about alignment. Not about forcing the world into your shape, but about shaping yourself to move gracefully within the world. And yet, surrender is not the same as passivity. It does not mean giving up or doing nothing. It means shifting your focus from the impossible to the possible, from external chaos to internal stability. It is the recognition that storms will always come, but you can always anchor yourself in clarity, resilience, and choice. Control, in its truest form, is not about bending the world to your will, but about mastering yourself in the face of what you cannot change. In the end, the paradox of control and chaos teaches us that life will never be fully predictable, and it is not meant to be. Chaos is not the enemy of control, it is its teacher. By facing uncertainty, you discover the strength of adaptability. By letting go of what you cannot hold, you discover the power of what you can. The world is not yours to control, but you are always yours to master. So, when chaos comes, and it will, remember the paradox. You do not need to tame the storm. You only need to learn how to stand in it without losing yourself. That is where true control lives, not in domination, but in balance. The paradox of peace. Peace. It is the one thing almost every human being longs for. Nations go to war claiming they are fighting for peace. Individuals meditate, pray, escape, or build entire lifestyles around the pursuit of it. We imagine peace as a final destination, a quiet meadow with no storms, a still lake with no ripples, a life without conflict or pain. But the closer we look, the more elusive it becomes. The harder we try to cling to it, the more it slips away. This is the paradox of peace, the strange truth that true peace is not found in the absence of conflict or chaos, but in the ability to remain centered within it. At first, peace seems external. We think, if only the world would calm down, if only people would stop hurting me, if only circumstances would go my way, then I would finally feel at peace. But life refuses to bend to such conditions. The world does not stop spinning. People do not stop disappointing. Circumstances rarely align perfectly. Waiting for life to remove all chaos before you feel peace is like waiting for the ocean to stop moving before you swim. Peace is not about silencing the storm. It is about finding stillness in the middle of it. The paradox deepens when we realize that peace often arrives through struggle. Think of a warrior who has fought battles and survived. Their peace is not the naive calm of someone who has never faced hardship, but the deep stillness of someone who has seen chaos and learned not to fear it. Or think of someone who has endured loss, heartbreak, or suffering. Their peace is not ignorance, but wisdom. True peace does not come from escaping pain, but from walking through it and discovering that it does not have to destroy you. We also see the paradox in daily life. A person who avoids conflict at all costs does not truly live in peace. They live in fear of disruption. Their calm is fragile, easily soured, hattered. But a person who has learned to stand firm in conflict, to remain composed when challenged, and to respond with clarity instead of panic, that person carries peace wherever they go. It is not that the world is calmer around them, it is that they are calmer within themselves. The paradox of peace reveals another truth. Peace is not passive. Many people mistake peace for avoidance, for turning away from problems, numbing emotions, or retreating from life. But that is not peace. That is escape. True peace requires courage. It means facing reality as it is, not as you wish it to be. It means being honest about pain, accepting imperfection, and embracing uncertainty without letting it control you. Peace is not weakness. It is strength that has learned to be gentle. And yet, peace cannot be forced. The more you demand it, the more it evades you. It arrives when you stop chasing it and begin practicing presence. It grows in gratitude, in acceptance, in the quiet decision to let go of what you cannot control. Peace is not a grand achievement waiting at the end of struggle. It is a practice you return to, moment by moment, choice by choice. The paradox also shows itself in relationships. We often think peace comes from everyone agreeing, from harmony without tension. But real peace in relationships does not come from never disagreeing. It comes from learning to disagree without destruction. It comes from respect, patience, and the ability to remain calm when emotions flare. In this way, peace is not silence, but understanding, not avoidance, but connection. In the end, the paradox of peace teaches us that peace is not somewhere out there waiting to be found. It is something cultivated within. It is not about controlling the world, but about mastering yourself. It is not about escaping storms, but about becoming the stillness inside them. The world will always carry noise, chaos, and uncertainty, but you can still carry peace in your heart. So, when life feels overwhelming, remember the paradox. Peace is not a prize you win when everything finally settles. It is a choice, a discipline, a way of being you can carry into every storm. True peace is not the absence of chaos. It is the presence of calm within it. The paradox of wealth. Wealth is one of humanity's greatest obsessions. From the moment we are old enough to dream, society teaches us to chase it. Money, possessions, status. These are portrayed as the gateways to freedom, security, and happiness. Advertisements promise that with more wealth, life will finally be comfortable, meaningful, and fulfilled. But the reality is more complicated. For while wealth can solve problems, it can also create new ones. It can provide comfort, yet leave you restless. It can buy freedom, yet trap you in chains of desire. This is the paradox of wealth, the strange truth that the more you accumulate, the more you may realize how little it gives you in return. At first, wealth feels like liberation. When you have enough to pay your bills, to feed yourself, to live without constant fear, money is a blessing. It reduces stress, it expands opportunity, it gives you choices that poverty cannot. There is no denying this truth. Financial stability is vital. But the paradox emerges when enough becomes never enough. What began as freedom slowly turns into a chase without end. The more you have, the more you want. The more you gain, the less satisfying each gain becomes. Satisfaction fades, replaced by new desires, new goals, new hungers. Wealth also brings another paradox. The richer you become, the more you may fear losing it. A poor person with little to lose often lives with less anxiety than the wealthy individual who is haunted by the thought of loss. The mansion becomes a prison, not because of walls, but because of the constant fear that it could be taken away. In this way, wealth can turn security into fragility, abundance into vulnerability. The paradox of wealth is also seen in the way money shapes identity. People often believe they are chasing wealth for freedom or happiness, but in truth, many are chasing validation. Wealth becomes a mirror, reflecting how others see you. A fancy car, a luxurious home, designer clothing. They are not just possessions, but signals to the world that you made it. Yet, If wealth is tied to your worth, you are never truly free. Your identity becomes a performance, your self-respect tied to numbers in a bank account. The paradox is cruel. The more you try to prove your value through wealth, the less you actually feel it. And yet, the paradox runs even deeper. Some of the wealthiest people in history lived lives of emptiness, plagued by depression, addiction, or loneliness. Meanwhile, some of the poorest communities radiate joy, connection, and generosity. Why? Because wealth is not the same as richness. You can be rich in money and poor in meaning. You can be rich in possessions and poor in love. And you can be materially poor, yet rich in community, laughter, and spirit. The paradox shows us that wealth, without wisdom, leaves you empty. But this does not mean wealth is evil or meaningless. It can be a powerful tool when placed in the right hands. Wealth can build schools, save lives, create opportunities, and relieve suffering. It can buy time, comfort, and freedom when used wisely. The paradox is not that wealth is bad, but that wealth is incomplete. It cannot provide what the soul truly longs for: meaning, connection, love, and purpose. The paradox of wealth ultimately asks us to redefine richness. True wealth is not measured only in currency, but in how deeply you live, how fully you love, how generously you give, and how much peace you carry within yourself. Money can buy comfort, but not fulfillment. It can buy attention, but not love. It can buy possessions, but not meaning. The richest life is not the one filled with things, but the one filled with moments, relationships, and purpose. So, the paradox leaves us with this truth. Wealth is both powerful and powerless. It can open doors, but it cannot tell you which ones to walk through. It can fill your hands, but it cannot fill your heart. It can extend your life in years, but it cannot deepen your life in meaning. Wealth, in the end, is a tool. Nothing more, nothing less. The real question is not how much of it you have, but how wisely you use it, and whether you let it serve you or enslave you. The paradox of aging. Aging is one of life's great certainties, an unrelenting process written into our very cells. From the moment we are born, we begin to age, though in youth we barely notice it. We chase the future eagerly, wishing to grow taller, stronger, freer. But somewhere along the journey, the excitement of growing older shifts into fear. Wrinkles appear, energy fades, years accelerate, and mortality moves from a distant concept to a looming reality. Aging is both gain and loss, gift and burden, beauty and decay. This is the paradox of aging. The strange truth that as time takes things from us, it also gives us something far more valuable in return. At first, aging feels like decline. Society glorifies youth, praising beauty, strength, and vitality as though they are the ultimate standards of worth. Advertisements sell us creams, surgeries, and diets, promising to preserve what cannot truly be preserved. And when the body inevitably changes, many feel ashamed, as if aging is a failure rather than a natural victory of survival. But hidden beneath the surface of this fear lies a profound paradox. Aging may weaken the body, but it strengthens the soul. The paradox of aging reveals itself most clearly when we compare what youth and age truly bring. Youth offers energy, possibility, and a sense of endless time. But it also carries insecurity, confusion, and naivety. Aging, on the other hand, strips away certain freedoms: physical vigor, quick recovery, wide-open time, but it replaces them with perspective, wisdom, and clarity. With age, you begin to see what truly matters. The noise quiets. The urgency to impress fades. You stop living for everyone else's approval and begin, finally, to live for yourself. There is also a shift in how time is experienced. For the young, time feels abundant, stretching endlessly into the future. They squander it carelessly, as TCs. Oh, there will always be more. But for the aging, time becomes precious. Every day holds weight. Every moment matters more. Ironically, it is when you have less time that you finally learn how to value it. The paradox is cruel and beautiful. Youth has time without wisdom. Age has wisdom without time. The paradox extends to relationships as well. In youth, we crave wide networks, validation, and endless connections. But as we age, we discover that fewer deeper bonds mean more than countless shallow ones. We begin to let go of toxic ties, of meaningless drama, of the need to please everyone. We choose peace over popularity,
authenticity over appearance. Aging teaches us to prune away what is hollow so we can nourish what is real. And yet, the paradox also reveals the fragility of the human condition. As years pass, loss becomes inevitable, of people, of abilities, of places that once defined you. Each loss is painful, but each also teaches resilience. With each goodbye, you learn how to hold tighter to what remains. With each change, you learn that identity is not defined by what fades, but by what endures. The paradox of aging also carries a gift few recognize. The deeper you move into life's later chapters, the more you understand gratitude. Youth takes things for granted because it does not yet know the pain of losing them. Age transforms ordinary moments, a laugh with a friend, a walk in the sun, the warmth of a memory, into treasures. What once seemed small becomes extraordinary. The fragility of life makes its beauty brighter. But perhaps the deepest layer of this paradox lies in mortality itself. Aging is, inescapably, a march toward death. And yet, in facing death, life becomes more vivid. Awareness of the end gives meaning to the middle. If we lived forever, each moment would lose urgency. But because we do not, every moment matters more. Death is not sapiecy, a rate from aging. It is its silent teacher. Together they remind us that what ends is also what gives life its value. In the end, the paradox of aging teaches us that aging is not simply about decline, but about transformation. It is the slow exchange of one kind of wealth for another, energy for wisdom, speed for depth, time for meaning. Aging does not take everything from you. It gives you the ability to finally see what was always worth keeping. So, when you look in the mirror and see new lines, do not only see loss, see survival, see memory, see evidence that you lived, endured, and grew. Aging is not your enemy. It is proof of life. And the paradox is this: the older you become, the less you have, but the richer you are. The paradox of vulnerability. Vulnerability is a word that makes many people uncomfortable. To be vulnerable means to open yourself, to reveal the parts of you that are fragile, tender, and uncertain. It means showing your wounds, admitting your fears, and lowering the defenses that protect your heart. And for most of us, this feels dangerous. Vulnerability looks like weakness, exposure, and risk. Yet the paradox is this: vulnerability, which feels like the surest path to pain, is also the only path to intimacy, connection, authenticity, and strength. This is the paradox of vulnerability, the strange truth that by allowing yourself to be seen in your weakness, you become stronger than ever before. At first, vulnerability feels unbearable. Society praises confidence, control, and resilience. We are taught to wear masks, to show only the polished parts of ourselves, to keep our pain hidden. Crying is seen as weakness, admitting fear is seen as failure, asking for help is seen as dependence. So, we armor up, building walls to protect ourselves from judgment, rejection, or betrayal. And for a while, the walls work. We feel safe behind them. But the paradox reveals itself quickly. Walls that keep pain out also keep love out. Protection becomes isolation. What you build to defend yourself slowly becomes your prison. The paradox deepens when we look at relationships. The connections that matter most, friendships, love, family, cannot thrive without vulnerability. Think about it. You cannot truly love someone without risking heartbreak. You cannot truly trust someone without risking betrayal. You cannot truly be seen without risking rejection. Vulnerability makes us human, and it is the very thing that allows bonds to deepen. Without it, relationships stay shallow, built on performance instead of truth. With it, they grow roots strong enough to withstand storms. And here's He's strange beauty. Vulnerability does not weaken strength. It reveals it. To admit you are afraid takes courage. To show your scars takes resilience. To speak your truth when your voice shakes requires more power than silence ever could. Strength is not pretending you are invincible. Strength is standing in your humanity and saying, I may be broken, but I am still here. That is the kind of strength that inspires others, the kind that builds trust, the kind that lasts. The paradox of vulnerability is also about self-growth. Many people try to hide their flaws, mistakes, and insecurities from themselves, not just from others. They bury shame deep inside, convincing themselves that ignoring it will make it disappear. But shame thrives in silence. It festers in secrecy. Vulnerability, the willingness to face your own truth, to say, "This is me, imperfect but real," is the only path to healing. By exposing the wound, you allow it to close. By admitting your brokenness, you begin to rebuild. Vulnerability, paradoxically, is the key to self-forgiveness and transformation. Yet vulnerability is not recklessness. It does not mean bearing your soul to everyone without discernment. It is about choosing wisely where to be open, about offering your truth to those who have earned the right to hear it. True vulnerability is not about carelessness. It is about courage paired with wisdom. The paradox reminds us that vulnerability is powerful, not because it is easy, but because it is deliberate. We also see this paradox in leadership and influence. Many believe leaders must always be confident, flawless, and commanding. But the leaders who inspire us most are those who admit their failures, share their doubts, and speak honestly about their struggles. Vulnerability makes them relatable, and relatability builds trust. A leader who hides behind perfection creates distance. A leader who shows humanity creates connection. What looks like weakness becomes the very thing that strengthens their impact. In the end, the paradox of vulnerability teaches us that the parts of us we most want to hide are often the very parts that make us powerful. Vulnerability is not the opposite of strength. It is its foundation. It is the door through which love, trust, and healing enter. By refusing to be vulnerable, we may protect ourselves from pain, but we also protect ourselves from joy, intimacy, and meaning. So, the next time you feel the urge to hide your true self, remember the paradox. What feels like exposure is the beginning of freedom. What feels like weakness is the seed of strength. Vulnerability will always feel dangerous, but it is the only path to a life that is real, deep, and alive. The happiness paradox, happiness, the single most pursued state of being in human history. People chase it in careers, in love, in wealth, in recognition, in adventure. Entire industries are built on the promise of it. Self-help books, motivational seminars, advertisements, and even governments declare the pursuit of happiness as life's ultimate purpose. Yet, for all the chasing, happiness remains elusive. The more we seek it, the further it seems to drift away. The harder we try to grab hold of it, the quicker it slips through our fingers. This is the happiness paradox, the strange truth that the pursuit of happiness often prevents us from ever truly finding it. At its core, happiness feels simple. A laugh with a friend, a moment of peace, an accomplishment achieved. Happiness arises naturally when we are present in life. But when happiness becomes a goal, something to achieve, it transforms into pressure. We begin asking, am I happy enough? Am I living the life I should? Why does joy not last? This constant measuring, this relentless evaluation, turns joy into a test we can never pass. The paradox is cruel. Happiness arrives when we stop obsessing over it, but it vanishes when we make it our primary pursuit. Think of it like sleep. The harder you try to force yourself to sleep, the more restless you become. Sleep comes naturally when you let go. Happiness is the same. It blooms in moments when you are not chasing it, when you lose yourself in creativity, when you share a deep conversation, when you watch a sunset, when you stop thinking about whether you're happy and simply live. The pursuit creates pressure. The letting go creates joy. The paradox also reveals itself in achievement. Many believe that happiness will finally come once they arrive, once they land the job, earn the money, find the partner, or gain the recognition. But how often does this story play out the same way? You reach the milestone, you feel a surge of joy, and then, almost instantly, the joy fades. The mind shifts to the next goal, the next hunger, the next desire. Happiness tied to achievement is temporary, because achievement cannot satisfy the soul's deeper need for meaning. The happiness paradox also speaks to comparison. In a world of social media, we are constantly shown curated versions of other people's lives. Everyone appears happier, more successful, more fulfilled. And so we measure ourselves against illusions, believing happiness is something others have mastered, and we have failed to grasp. Yet the truth is that many of those who look happiest are often struggling silently. Comparison poisons joy, turning what we have into not enough.
Ironically, the very search for happiness creates the unhappiness we fear. But the paradox holds a hidden key. Happiness cannot be forced, but it can be invited. It is not achieved, but allowed. It is not the result of perfection, but of presence. True happiness is found not in constant pleasure, but in balance, in accepting life's full spectrum of emotions, not just the highs. In fact, trying to erase sadness, anger, or grief only intensifies them. By embracing all emotions, happiness becomes richer, more real, less fragile. Happiness also grows through meaning. Research and wisdom alike show that happiness is deepest when tied not to fleeting pleasures, but to purpose. Acts of service, connection, creativity, and growth bring a fulfillment that momentary pleasures cannot. The paradox is clear. Happiness is not something you chase directly, but something that follows as a byproduct of living meaningfully. And yet, the paradox warns us not to idolize happiness above all else. Life is not meant to be constant joy. Struggle, pain, and hardship are not failures. They are part of the very fabric of being human. Without sorrow, joy would lose its flavor. Without loss, love would lose its urgency. Without darkness, light would not be seen. True happiness is not about erasing suffering, but about finding beauty and gratitude in spite of it. In the end, the happiness paradox teaches us that happiness is not a destination, but a companion. It is not a final achievement, but a fleeting visitor that comes and goes, reminding us to savor the present. Happiness cannot be hoarded, but it can be welcomed. And the secret is this: you do not need to chase it. You only need to live fully, love deeply, and be present in the ordinary. So, the paradox leaves us with this truth. The moment you stop demanding happiness is the moment it quietly appears. And the more you allow life to unfold, with all its ups and downs, the more you realize that happiness was never something to be hunted. It was something to be lived. The paradox of success and failure. Success and failure are often painted as opposites. One is celebrated, the other feared. We grow up believing that success is the ultimate prize, the proof of our worth, while failure is a shameful stain to be avoided at all costs. Success is tied to pride, recognition, and achievement. Failure to embarrassment, rejection, and loss. But the deeper we look, the more this separation dissolves. The two are not enemies but companions, not rivals but partners. This is the paradox of success and failure. The strange truth that success often grows out of failure, and failure often hides within success. At first glance, success looks simple. You set a goal, you work hard, you achieve it, you climb the mountain and plant your flag. But what comes next? For many, success brings not only joy, but emptiness. You reach the summit, but the satisfaction doesn't last. The finish line moves forward. The achievement that once felt like everything quickly fades, replaced by a hunger for more. Success, when idolized, becomes a trap, a cycle of endless striving that never fulfills. The paradox is cruel. Success promises completion, but often delivers restlessness. Failure, on the other hand, appears devastating. It feels like collapse, like proof that you are not enough. But hidden within failure is the soil where growth takes root. Failure strips away illusions. It teaches humility, resilience, and adaptation in ways success never can. Many of history's greatest breakthroughs were born from failure. Experiments gone wrong, rejected ideas, collapsed ventures. Failure refines you, tests you, forces you to discover strength you didn't know you had. The paradox becomes clear. Failure, though bitter, is often the teacher that paves the road to success. The intertwining of success and failure is visible in every meaningful story. The athlete who wins a championship carries not just triumph, but the weight of countless defeats behind it. The entrepreneur who builds a thriving company does so on the ashes of failed attempts. Even artists and thinkers celebrated for genius often leave behind volumes of forgotten, discarded work. What the world applauds as success is always built on a foundation of failures. Without the failures, the success could never exist. And yet, the paradox cuts both ways. Every success carries within it the seed of failure. A successful business may grow complacent and collapse. A successful relationship may breed neglect if taken for granted. Even personal victories can lead to ego, arrogance, or stagnation. Success is not a permanent state, but a fragile moment balanced on the edge of possible failure. The two are inseparable. One births the other, one tempers the other. The paradox of success and failure also transforms how we see ourselves. Many people define their worth only by their victories, hiding their failures in shame. But in truth, failure reveals character just as much, if not more, than success. Who you are in loss, in rejection, in defeat, that is the measure of resilience. And who you become after success, whether humble, grateful, and still striving, or arrogant, empty, and stagnant, that too reveals your soul. Success without humility becomes failure. Failure with persistence becomes success. This paradox also reshapes how we live. If we fear failure too much, we never take risks, and without risks, success never comes. But if we cling too tightly to success, we lose the courage to grow, and stagnation becomes its own form of failure. The only way forward is to embrace both. To see failure not as the end, but as a step. To see success not as a final destination, but as a passing milestone. Together they form the rhythm of growth. In the end, the paradox of success and failure teaches us that life is not about avoiding failure or idolizing success, but about learning from both. Success gives us moments of joy, failure gives us moments of depth, and together they shape us into something greater. The true failure is not in falling, but in refusing to rise again. The true success is not in reaching the top, but in continuing to grow, no matter how many times you stumble. So, the next time you succeed, celebrate, but stay humble. And the next time you fail, grieve if you must, but rise again. Success and failure are not opposites on the path of life. They are the path itself, weaving together to form the very fabric of who you become. The paradox of attention. Attention is one of the most powerful currencies of our age. Entire industries are built on capturing it. Social media, advertising, entertainment, even politics. Whoever holds attention holds influence, power, and control. And in our personal lives, we crave it too. We want to be noticed, recognized, valued, seen. Attention feels like affirmation, like proof that we matter. Yet the paradox is this. The more desperately we seek attention, the less authentic it becomes. And the more we give it away carelessly, the more we lose the ability to focus on what truly matters. This is the paradox of attention. The strange truth that what we focus on shapes our reality, yet chasing attention often blinds us to life itself. At first, attention seems harmless. To be noticed feels good. A compliment, a like, a follower, a nod of approval. These small affirmations light up the brain's reward system. They make us feel connected and important. But the paradox emerges when attention becomes addiction. What once felt validating soon turns into hunger. We begin to measure our worth by the eyes of others. If they applaud, we feel alive. If they ignore us, we feel invisible. The more we seek attention to prove our value, the more fragile our self-worth becomes. On the other side, attention is also about what we give, not just what we receive. Every moment of focus is an investment, and where we place it determines the shape of our lives. Yet in a world overflowing with distractions, our attention is constantly pulled in 1,000 directions. Notifications, ads, endless scrolling, all competing for fragments of our mind. And so, paradoxically, we live in an age where attention is abundant in quantity but scarce in depth. We pay attention everywhere, yet nowhere fully. Surrounded by noise, we lose the ability to hear what matters. The paradox of attention also shows itself in relationships. When we crave constant attention from others, we risk pushing them away. Clinging, demanding, performing for validation, these weaken real intimacy. Yet when we offer our attention genuinely, listening deeply, being fully present, relationships flourish. The paradox is clear. To receive authentic attention, you must first learn to give it. And giving it means putting away distractions, silencing ego, and being fully with another person in the moment. This paradox extends into creativity and achievement. Many people dream of recognition, of standing in the spotlight, but ironically, the greatest works, art, writing, innovation, rarely come from obsessing over attention. They come from immersion, from losing yourself in the craft without worrying about who is watching. The artist who creates only for applause finds their work shallow. The artist who creates for love finds attention arriving as a byproduct.
When you stop chasing attention and start giving attention to your purpose, the world eventually notices. There is also a hidden danger in attention. What we feed grows. If you give constant attention to fear, to resentment, to comparison, they expand in your life. If you give attention to gratitude, to growth, to compassion, they expand instead. The paradox is profound. Attention shapes reality, yet we often waste it on illusions. We give more focus to appearances than to depth, more to validation than to meaning, more to distraction than to purpose. In doing so, we shape lives that feel shallow, even when surrounded by noise. And yet, the paradox is not hopeless. It carries a gift. Attention, when reclaimed, becomes power. By choosing what to focus on, you reclaim your life. By practicing presence, whether in work, love, or silence, you transform ordinary moments into sacred ones. By shifting your gaze inward, learning to validate yourself rather than waiting for the crowd, you free yourself from dependence on fleeting attention. In the end, the paradox of attention teaches us that attention is both fragile and infinite. It is stolen easily, wasted quickly, yet when directed with intention, it can change everything. To chase attention is to lose it. To give it freely is to grow it. To scatter it is to weaken it. To focus it is to make it powerful. So the paradox leaves us with this challenge. Stop begging for the world's eyes and start mastering your own. Attention is not about being seen. It is about seeing. It is not about collecting applause. It is about choosing what deserves your focus. Because in the end, your life becomes whatever you pay attention to. The paradox of silence. Silence, a word that carries both comfort and discomfort. To some, it is peace. To others, it is unbearable. We live in a world addicted to noise, constant conversation, endless music, notifications, chatter, distractions. Silence feels unnatural, awkward, even threatening. People rush to fill quiet moments with words, fearing what might surface if the noise fades. And yet, silence holds a paradox. While it can feel empty, it is often the most profound space of all. This is the paradox of silence. The strange truth that silence can be oppressive when forced, but liberating when chosen. It can conceal truths, yet also reveal them. It can distance people, yet also bring them closer than words ever could. At first, silence appears as absence. It is the pause in conversation, the blank space in music, the stillness in a room. Many interpret it as emptiness, as nothingness. But the paradox is that silence is never truly empty. It is full of unspoken feelings, full of reflection, full of meaning waiting to be discovered. A single silence can say more than 1,000 words. When someone you love is gone, their silence speaks louder than any sound. When someone sits with you in grief without speaking, their silence becomes the purest form of presence. The paradox of silence also reveals itself in relationships. Silence can be healing, a shared stillness between people who no longer need to fill the air with words to prove their bond. Yet silence can also wound, when it becomes neglect, avoidance, or the infamous silent treatment. Silence can communicate love, but it can also communicate rejection. It can create intimacy, but it can also create distance. The same silence that feels safe in one moment can feel suffocating in another. In society, silence carries another layer of paradox. At times, silence is wisdom, choosing not to speak when words would harm, choosing to listen instead of interrupt. But silence can also be complicity. Remaining silent in the face of injustice allows harm to continue. Thus, silence becomes both strength and weakness, both wisdom and cowardice, depending on how and why it is used. The paradox lies not in silence itself, but in the intent behind it. Silence also plays a powerful role within the self. When we finally step away from the noise of the world, silence becomes a mirror. It reflects our hidden thoughts, our buried fears, our unspoken desires. This is why many people cannot stand silence. It confronts them with themselves. Yet within this discomfort lies transformation. Only in silence can we hear the whispers of intuition, the stirrings of creativity, the quiet truths we drown out with distraction. Silence is not emptiness. It is the space where the soul finally speaks. The paradox deepens when we look at the world of creation and art. Music without silence is chaos. Words without pauses are overwhelming. The spaces in between give meaning to the sound. In painting, the empty canvas around the image defines the image itself. Silence is not the absence of meaning, but the frame that gives meaning shape. Without silence, expression collapses. With silence, expression flourishes. And yet, silence cannot be forced. When silence is imposed, when someone silences your voice, your truth, your story, it becomes oppression. It wounds, it suffocates, it erases. But when silence is chosen, it becomes power. The deliberate pause before speaking, the intentional withdrawal from noise, the mindful stillness in meditation, these silences heal, empower, and renew. The paradox teaches us that silence is dangerous when it steals your voice, but sacred when it returns you to yourself. In the end, the paradox of silence reminds us that silence is not empty space, but sacred ground. It is not always comfortable, but it is always meaningful. It can harm or heal, connect or divide, conceal or reveal. Its power lies not in its presence alone, but in how we use it, how we interpret it, how we allow it to shape us. So, when silence comes, do not always rush to fill it. Sometimes the loudest truths are spoken without words. Sometimes the deepest healing happens in stillness. And sometimes the most profound connection you can offer another person is not what you say, but the silence you share. The paradox of simplicity. Simplicity is often praised as the ultimate solution to life's chaos. Less is more, we are told. Simplify your home, your work, your mind, and you will find peace. And indeed, there is truth in this. A simpler life frees us from clutter, from endless distractions, from the constant hunger for more. But the paradox of simplicity lies in the strange reality that simplicity itself is not always simple. The pursuit of simplicity can become as complex and exhausting as the chaos we were trying to escape. This is the paradox, that while simplicity promises freedom, it can also turn into another burden, another performance, another chase. At first, simplicity feels like clarity. We strip away what we don't need, we organize, we declutter, we cut the excess. The room becomes spacious, the mind becomes lighter, there is relief in letting go. But then, subtly, simplicity becomes an ideal to be perfected. People begin to compete over who lives the simplest life, turning it into another form of consumption, buying minimalist furniture, curating minimalist wardrobes, performing minimalism for the eyes of others. The paradox emerges. Simplicity, when forced or performed, becomes just another version of complexity. This paradox is not new. Throughout history, great thinkers and spiritual leaders have spoken of the power of simplicity, living with less, focusing on what matters, rejecting excess. Yet even in monasteries or spiritual movements, the pursuit of simplicity sometimes grows into rigid rules, strict systems, and endless rituals. What was meant to liberate can easily turn into confinement. Simplicity, if treated as an achievement, can become its own form of pride. The paradox of simplicity also reveals itself in daily living. Striving to simplify every detail of your life can lead to stress rather than ease. You may spend hours organizing, optimizing, and reducing, only to realize you've complicated your life in the name of simplicity. True simplicity, paradoxically, often comes not from control, but from acceptance. It is not about obsessing over removing every difficulty, but about letting go of what does not truly matter. And yet, simplicity carries undeniable wisdom. Life filled with endless possessions, commitments, and distractions often leads to emptiness rather than fulfillment. Simplicity teaches us to focus on quality over quantity, depth over surface, presence over performance. A single conversation with a friend is more nourishing than hundreds of shallow interactions. A quiet walk can bring more peace than 100 new gadgets. A single meaningful pursuit can outweigh endless busyness. The paradox is not that simplicity fails, but that it only works when it stops being another competition or obsession. The paradox of simplicity also appears in creativity. Artists, writers, and innovators know that the greatest works are not always those filled with the most detail, but those that capture essence. A simple melody can stir the heart more than a complex symphony. A few words can move the soul more than an elaborate speech. But arriving at simplicity is not easy. It often requires going through complexity, stripping away the unnecessary until only truth remains. As Leonardo da Vinci said, simplicity is the ultimate sophistication.
The paradox is that achieving simplicity requires hard work, refinement, and even struggle. Simplicity also challenges our desires. We live in a world that equates more with better, more money, more possessions, more followers, more status. To embrace simplicity is to rebel against this illusion. Yet it also raises a paradoxical fear. If I live with less, will I be seen as less? If I choose a simpler path, will I be left behind? Simplicity forces us to confront the truth, that meaning is not found in accumulation, but in presence. That enough is not failure, but freedom. Ultimately, the paradox of simplicity reminds us that simplicity is not something to perform or perfect. It is a way of being, one that values essence over excess, presence over performance, gratitude over greed. True simplicity is not measured by how little you own or how perfectly you organize, but by how freely you live, how fully you engage with what matters, and how little you are enslaved by the unnecessary. So, the paradox leaves us with this truth. Simplicity is both the easiest and the hardest path. It is easy because it asks us to let go, but hard because letting go feels impossible in a world that worships more. And yet, when embraced with sincerity rather than obsession, simplicity gives us the space to breathe, the clarity to see, and the freedom to finally live. The paradox of truth versus perception, truth and perception, two forces that shape our reality, often colliding, sometimes blending, and rarely aligning perfectly. We are taught to value truth above all, to seek it, defend it, and live by it. Yet most of what we experience in daily life is not pure truth, but perception, our filtered, limited, and biased interpretation of reality. This is the paradox of truth versus perception, that while truth exists independently of us, we can only ever access it through perception, and perception, though flawed, can sometimes feel more real than truth itself. At first, truth seems absolute. Facts exist. Reality exists. 2 plus 2 will always equal 4. Gravity pulls whether we believe in it or not. The sun rises each morning, independent of opinion. Truth has a solidity that perception lacks. Yet, paradoxically, our lives are not lived in truth alone, but in how we perceive that truth. Two people can stand in the same room, witness the same event, and walk away with completely different stories. Which is the truth? The event itself may be fixed, but perception shapes the meaning, and meaning often matters more to us than fact. The paradox grows sharper when we realize how perception can obscure truth entirely. Human beings are riddled with biases. Cognitive shortcuts that distort what we see and believe. Confirmation bias, emotional influence, cultural conditioning, all of these bend perception. We don't see the world as it is, we see it as we are. And often, what we perceive feels more convincing than any external truth. A rumor may be false, yet, if enough people believe it, its impact becomes real. A lie can destroy reputations, shape elections, or spark wars, not because it is true, but because it was perceived as truth. On the other hand, perception can sometimes reveal truths that facts alone cannot. Truth without perception is cold, detached, empty of human experience. Perception gives truth its color, its emotion, its meaning. For example, love cannot be measured or proven in numbers, yet the perception of it creates a reality more powerful than any scientific fact. Justice, beauty, hope, these are truths only because we perceive them as such. The paradox is that while perception distorts, it also enriches. It blinds us and awakens us in equal measure. This paradox also plays out in identity. Who you are is not just the truth of your existence, but the perception others hold of you, and the perception you hold of yourself. You may know your intentions, but others judge you by what they perceive. You may achieve success, but if you perceive yourself as unworthy, no truth will change how you feel. Here lies the sting of the paradox. Perception often outweighs truth in the realm of human experience. Consider also how truth can be weaponized when stripped of perception. Facts delivered without empathy can wound more deeply than lies. A truth told at the wrong time, without consideration of perception, can shatter trust. Meanwhile, a comforting perception, even if not fully accurate, can heal, inspire, or guide someone toward growth. The paradox asks, is it always truth that matters most, or is it the perception of truth that shapes our lives more deeply? And yet, truth has its quiet power. Perceptions shift, but truth remains. Lies collapse eventually under their own weight. Illusions break. Perceptions evolve with time, but truth, even if hidden, endures. The paradox does not diminish truth, but it humbles us by reminding us that we may never grasp it fully. We live not in truth itself, but in our interpretations of it, and our interpretations will always be partial, colored, and fragile. Ultimately, the paradox of truth versus perception reminds us that reality is layered. Truth is the foundation, but perception is the lens. Together, they form the world we know. To live wisely is not to dismiss truth nor to blindly trust perception, but to hold both with humility. To seek truth while questioning your perception. To honor perception while grounding yourself in truth. So, the paradox leaves us with this insight. Truth is the bedrock of existence, but perception is the fabric of experience. We may never see truth in its entirety, but we can refine our perception, seek clarity, and strive toward honesty. For in the end, life is not just about discovering truth. It is about learning how to see. The paradox of hardship. Hardship is something every human being encounters, though we spend much of our lives trying to avoid it. We build safety nets, plan carefully, and cling to comfort, hoping to escape life's inevitable storms. And yet, no matter how carefully we prepare, hardship arrives. It comes as illness, loss, failure, rejection, betrayal, poverty, or the quiet ache of loneliness. At first, hardship feels like pure destruction, a cruel reminder that life can shatter us at any moment. But hidden within it is the paradox. Hardship, while breaking us, is also what builds us. It strips away illusions, reveals truths, and forges strength that comfort never could. This is the paradox of hardship, the strange truth that what we fear most often becomes the very thing that transforms us. At the surface, hardship looks merciless. It interrupts plans, steals dreams, and leaves scars. We curse it, resist it, and ask, why me? And yet, if we look back on our lives, we often find that the most difficult chapters are the ones that shaped us the most. Hardship becomes the teacher we never asked for, but the one that teaches the lessons we could not have learned otherwise. Without pain, resilience cannot exist. Without struggle, growth is shallow. Without loss, gratitude is hollow. The paradox is cruel but undeniable. The very experiences that bring us to our knees are the ones that make us stand taller than before. Hardship also exposes truth. Comfort hides illusions, false friendships, shallow values, untested beliefs. But hardship strips away the unnecessary and forces us to see reality clearly. The friends who remain during hardship are the ones who are real. The values you cling to in suffering are the ones that define you. The strength you discover when you thought you had none is the strength that was always waiting to be revealed. Hardship is not only a destroyer, it is a revealer. The paradox deepens when we realize that hardship, though bitter, is often the birthplace of compassion. People who have suffered deeply often understand others in ways the untested cannot. Hardship softens the heart, even as it hardens the spirit. It teaches empathy because it shows us what it means to hurt, to grieve, to long for relief. The paradox is that suffering isolates us in the moment, but later, it connects us more deeply to others who have suffered too. And yet hardship also tempts us into despair. Many break under its weight, becoming bitter, closed, or hardened against the world. This too is part of the paradox. Hardship can either strengthen or destroy. It can forge resilience or foster resentment. It can deepen wisdom or deepen wounds. The difference lies not in the hardship itself, but in how we respond to it. The same fire that melts wax hardens clay. The same storm that uproots a shallow tree helps a deep-rooted one grow stronger. Hardship also redefines success. In times of comfort, success may look like wealth, recognition, or achievement. But in the middle of hardship, success shrinks into something raw and real, surviving another day, holding on to hope, refusing to give up. The paradox is that hardship lowers the standard of what it means to succeed, but in doing so, it elevates the meaning of life itself. Suddenly, small victories become monumental. A laugh in the middle of grief becomes priceless. A moment of peace in the middle of chaos becomes sacred. The paradox of hardship is also a reminder of impermanence. Nothing lasts forever. Not joy, not sorrow, not pain, not comfort. Hardship teaches us this truth in the most painful way, but also the most liberating way. Knowing that even suffering has an end allows us to endure. And knowing that comfort too is fleeting teaches us not to take it for granted. Ultimately, the paradox of hardship reminds us that while we cannot avoid suffering, we can transform it. Hardship strips us bare, but in doing so, it allows us to rebuild on stronger foundations. It humbles us, but it also awakens us. It takes away, but it also gives back in forms we never expected: resilience, wisdom, compassion, depth. So, the paradox leaves us with this truth. Hardship is both the enemy we fear and the ally we need. It crushes us, yet in crushing us, it shows us the strength of our spirit. It wounds us, yet in wounding us, it opens the door to deeper healing. Hardship is not something we would choose, but it is something that chooses us. And in enduring it, we discover who we truly are. The paradox of memory. Memory is the archive of our lives, the invisible thread connecting who we were with who we are and who we will become. Without memory, identity collapses. It is memory that allows us to love, to learn, to recognize faces, to carry lessons from the past into the present. Yet memory is not flawless. It fades, it bends, it deceives. What we believe to be solid truth is often reshaped by time, emotion, and perspective. This is the paradox of memory. That memory is both the foundation of our identity and one of the most unreliable guides we have. At first, memory feels like fact. We recall events, conversations, faces, and moments as though replaying a recording, but memory is not a recording. It is a reconstruction. Each time we recall an event, the brain reshapes it, influenced by our current emotions, beliefs, and context. Over time, details blur, meanings shift, and what we remember may no longer be what truly happened. The paradox is painful. The very thing we rely on to define our past is constantly rewriting itself. Memory also holds paradox in its emotional weight. Some memories bring comfort, warmth, and joy, moments of laughter, love, and triumph that we carry like treasures. But the same mechanism that preserves joy also preserves pain. Traumas, regrets, and losses remain etched into the mind, resurfacing when least expected. Memory gives us sweetness, but it also chains us to sorrow. To hold on to memory is to carry both light and shadow at once. And yet, memory is selective. We do not remember every detail of every day. We remember fragments. The mind chooses what to keep and what to discard, often without our awareness. Sometimes, trivial details remain vivid while important moments fade. A scent, a song, a single glance can unlock floods of memory long buried. The paradox is that while memory feels central to identity, much of it is accidental, shaped not by deliberate choice, but by chance. The paradox of memory also reveals itself in relationships. Two people can share the same experience and carry completely different memories of it. For one, the moment may symbolize joy. For the other, pain. Which memory is true? Both and neither. Memory is not only personal, but relational, shaped by perception, emotion, and the meanings we attach. This is why old arguments resurface with both sides claiming different recollections. Memory does not simply record what happened, it records what we felt about what happened. There is also the paradox of longing. Sometimes we hold on to memories so tightly that they prevent us from living fully in the present. We revisit the good old days, or replay mistakes over and over, as though memory itself could rewrite reality. But memory is a ghost. It can haunt, but it cannot change the past. And yet, letting go of memory feels like losing a part of ourselves. The paradox is that memory anchors us, but it can also trap us. And still, memory carries beauty. Even flawed, even fragile, it is what allows love to endure. When we remember someone who has passed, memory gives them life again. When we recall lessons from failure, memory turns pain into wisdom. When we cherish a smile, a laugh, a moment of tenderness, memory turns fleeting experiences into timeless treasures. The imperfection of memory does not erase its value, it deepens it. Its fragility reminds us to live fully, because what we remember will always be less than what we experience. The paradox sharpens at life's edges. In old age, memory often begins to slip. Names are forgotten, faces blur, events vanish. Watching memory fade is one of life's greatest sorrows. Yet even then, the essence of memory remains. The way love is felt even without words, the way a song can stir recognition when all else is gone. Memory may falter, but its traces linger in the soul. Ultimately, the paradox of memory reminds us that memory is both gift and illusion, treasure and trickster. It connects us to our past, but also distorts it. It gives us identity, but also reshapes it. We cannot rely on memory for absolute truth, but we cannot live without it either. So, the paradox leaves us with this truth. Memory is not about perfect accuracy, but about meaning. What we remember shapes us not because it is flawless, but because it carries emotion, lessons, and love. In the end, memory's fragility makes life more precious, because every moment we live may one day become the only memory we carry of it. The paradox of forging connections. Human beings are wired for connection. From the moment we are born, we seek touch, eye contact, and the comfort of being held. We grow by bonding with others, by sharing experiences, by finding belonging in families, friendships, and communities. To connect is to be human. Yet, at the same time, connection is one of the most fragile, complex, and risky parts of life. The closer we draw to others, the more we open ourselves to misunderstanding, rejection, and betrayal. This is the paradox of forging connections, that while relationships give life meaning, they also expose us to pain. While connection is essential, it is never without cost. At first, forging a connection feels like magic. You meet someone who understands you, someone whose presence feels like home. Words flow easily, laughter comes naturally, and the loneliness inside you quiets. In those moments, connection feels effortless, as if it was destined. But beneath that ease lies a paradox. True connection requires vulnerability, and vulnerability always carries risk. To be known is to be exposed, and to be exposed is to risk being hurt. The paradox deepens when we realize that the very qualities that create intimacy can also create conflict. Honesty, openness, and emotional closeness, the pillars of connection, can also lead to arguments, disappointment, and disillusionment when expectations collide. To connect deeply is to step into another person's world with all its beauty and all its chaos. And sometimes, the more deeply you connect, the more deeply you can wound one another. Forging connections also challenges our sense of identity. When we open ourselves to others, we are changed by them. We take in their perspectives, absorb their habits, and reshape parts of ourselves in response to the bond. Connection enriches us, but it can also blur our boundaries. The paradox emerges. We find ourselves in others, but sometimes we lose ourselves in them too. To connect is to expand, but it can also mean surrendering pieces of who we are. This paradox is especially visible in love. Romantic connections can feel transcendent. Two lives intertwining, two souls sharing a path. Love gives joy, safety, and meaning unlike anything else. And yet, love also magnifies vulnerability. Heartbreak, jealousy, betrayal, or loss. All these are only possible because we dared to connect. The same relationship that brings ecstasy can also bring despair. Love is the most beautiful connection, but it is also the most dangerous. Friendship carries its own paradox. True friends are the ones who see us as we are and stand by us anyway. But friendships too can fracture, over distance, over unspoken resentments, or simply over time. The paradox is that connection cannot be forced. It must be mutual, nurtured, and chosen again and again. Even the strongest bonds can wither if taken for granted, yet new connections can form in unexpected places, reminding us that the potential for connection never disappears. There is also a paradox in the age we live in. Technology connects us more than ever before. We can speak to people across the world instantly, share our lives in real time, and gather thousands of friends and followers. Yet, at the same time, people report feeling lonelier than ever. Digital connection gives the illusion of closeness, but often lacks depth. The paradox is cruel. Surrounded by connection, we can feel profoundly disconnected. And yet, connection remains one of life's greatest gifts. It is through connection that we learn empathy, that we discover parts of ourselves we didn't know existed, that we find meaning in both joy and suffering. A single shared moment, a hand held in silence, a deep conversation at midnight, a shared laugh in the middle of chaos, can outweigh years of solitude. The risk of connection is real, but so is the reward. Ultimately, The paradox of forging connections reminds us that relationships are both fragile and eternal, painful and healing, risky and necessary. To connect is to step into uncertainty, but it is also to step into possibility. We may be hurt, but we may also be transformed. We may lose, but we may also find. So, the paradox leaves us with this truth. To live without connection is to survive, but to live with it is to truly exist. Yes, connection will sometimes break you, but it will also put you back together in ways you never imagined. The paradox of meaning. Every human being longs for meaning. We want our lives to matter, our struggles to count for something, our existence to carry a purpose greater than survival. From the moment we become self-aware, we search for answers to the questions. Why am I here? What is the point? What gives my life significance? Meaning is the invisible thread that holds us together through hardship and guides us through uncertainty. Yet, the paradox of meaning is that the harder we chase it, the more elusive it becomes. Meaning cannot be forced, and yet it cannot be lived without. It is both discovered and created, both universal and personal, both fragile and enduring. At first, meaning seems like something external, something we must find out there in the world. We search for it in careers, achievements, relationships, spirituality, or recognition. We tell ourselves that if we just accomplish enough, or love deeply enough, or contribute greatly enough, we will finally feel that our life has meaning. But, paradoxically, meaning often escapes those who chase it directly. The more we demand that life reveal its grand purpose, the emptier it can feel. Meaning hides when we stare at it too hard, yet it often appears when we are not looking. In small acts of kindness, in fleeting moments of joy, in the quiet presence of love. The paradox deepens when we realize that meaning is not fixed, but constantly shifting. What feels meaningful at one stage of life may feel empty at another. A career that once gave identity may later feel hollow. A relationship that once defined us may fade or change. Meaning evolves with us, growing as we grow, shifting as we shift. Yet the desire for meaning remains constant, even as its form keeps changing. The paradox is that meaning is both stable and unstable. It anchors us, but it never stays the same. There is also the paradox of suffering. Strangely, some of life's deepest meanings arise not from pleasure, but from pain. People who endure loss, hardship, or tragedy often emerge with a stronger sense of purpose. They find meaning in resilience, in helping others, in honoring what was lost. Hardship strips life to its essence, and in that rawness, meaning emerges with a clarity that comfort rarely provides. The paradox is that suffering, which we wish to avoid, often deepens our sense of meaning more than comfort ever could. But meaning also carries a shadow. In the search for purpose, we can become trapped in comparison. We measure our lives against others, believing their path more meaningful than ours. We equate meaning with fame, wealth, or achievement, forgetting that meaning is deeply personal. A life of quiet service, invisible to the world, may carry more meaning than a life filled with recognition, but empty of authenticity. The paradox is that meaning is not measured by the size of impact, but by the depth of alignment between what we do and who we are. The paradox of meaning also challenges us with impermanence. We pour ourselves into projects, relationships, and causes, knowing that one day all of it will end. Civilizations fall, legacies fade, memories disappear. From a cosmic perspective, perhaps nothing truly matters. And yet, paradoxically, meaning still matters to us. A smile given today, an act of kindness, a word of encouragement, even if forgotten tomorrow, holds infinite weight in the moment it is lived. Meaning does not require eternity, it thrives in the present. This paradox is also what makes meaning so beautiful. It is not handed to us, it is something we co-create. Life does not arrive with a map or an answer. Instead, we are given the freedom and the burden to create our own meaning. Some find it in faith, some in art, some in family, some in service, some in personal growth. None of these are the meaning of life. They are each fragments of it, shaped by our choices. The paradox is that meaning is both discovered and invented. We uncover it as if it were always there, yet we also shape it with every action we take. Ultimately, the paradox of meaning reminds us that life's significance cannot be fully defined, but it can be deeply lived. Meaning is not a treasure buried somewhere waiting to be found once and for all. It is the way we choose to live each moment.
the values we embody, the love we give, and the courage we show. It is in the quiet, ordinary acts as much as in the extraordinary ones. So, the paradox leaves us with this truth. Meaning is not something you chase. It is something you cultivate. It is not waiting for you at the end of the road. It is woven into each step of the journey. The meaning of life may never be a single answer, but in living fully, we create meaning enough. The paradox of power. Power is one of humanity's oldest pursuits. From kingdoms and empires to corporations and relationships, the desire for power runs through history like fire. To have power is to influence, to decide, to protect, to control. It is the ability to bend the world toward your will. And yet, gore is never as simple as it seems. Those who gain it often become trapped by it. Those who cling to it risk losing themselves in the process, and those who fear it may end up giving it away to others. This is the paradox of power, the strange truth that power strengthens us but also weakens us, frees us but also enslaves us, elevates us but also corrupts us. At first glance, power feels like security. With power comes control over resources, decisions, or even people's opinions. It creates the illusion that we are safe from uncertainty. But the paradox is that the more power one holds, the more one fears losing it. Kings built armies not only to conquer, but to protect their thrones. CEOs work tirelessly not only to succeed, but to defend their position. Power creates anxiety, because the higher you climb, the further you have to fall. The very thing meant to bring peace of mind often brings sleepless nights. Power also carries the paradox of corruption. The moment someone gains authority, the temptation to abuse it follows. History is littered with leaders who began with noble intentions, but became tyrants when their power grew unchecked. This is not because power itself is evil, but because power magnifies what is already within us. The selfish become more selfish, the arrogant more arrogant, the compassionate more compassionate. Power reveals character, but it also distorts it. The paradox lies in the fact that while power gives us control over others, it often causes us to lose control over ourselves. On a personal level, power appears in relationships. Having power over another, emotional, financial, or social, can create security, but it can also create imbalance. Love rooted in control is not love at all. Friendships built on dominance collapse. Even in families, when power is misused, bonds are damaged. Yet power, when shared, can strengthen connection. The paradox is that power hoarded destroys trust, but power given away often creates more of it. The paradox of power also emerges in how we pursue it. Many chase power believing it will bring freedom. Yet, once attained, it often brings responsibility, pressure, and constraint. A leader may rise to the top imagining liberation, only to find themselves bound by endless duties. A person who seeks control in a relationship may discover they are trapped in constant vigilance. The paradox is clear. The pursuit of absolute power often leads not to freedom, but to imprisonment. Yet, paradoxically, the refusal of power can also enslave. Those who avoid responsibility, who shy away from influence, who silence themselves out of fear, give their power away to others. In doing so, they live at the mercy of forces beyond them. The paradox here is that both clinging to power and rejecting it entirely can make us prisoners. True strength lies in learning how to hold power wisely, without being consumed by it. Another paradox lies in humility. Leaders who wield power with humility often gain more influence than those who demand obedience. Power used in service creates loyalty, while power used for self-gain breeds rebellion. The paradox is that the most powerful leaders are often those who seem least concerned with power itself. Gandhi, for instance, had no armies, no wealth, no throne, yet his moral power shook an empire. Power also carries the paradox of impermanence. No matter how strong, wealthy, or influential someone becomes, power is never eternal. Empires crumble, leaders fall, reputations fade. The mighty of yesterday are forgotten by tomorrow, and yet, paradoxically, the smallest acts of power, a kind word, an act of justice, a stand against wrong, can echo for generations. What seems insignificant in the moment can outlast the grandest displays of dominance. Ultimately, the paradox of power reminds us that power itself is neither good nor evil. It is a mirror. It reflects who we are and magnifies it. To wield power wisely is to see it as responsibility, not possession. To misuse it is to invite ruin, not strength. Power is not something to be feared or worshipped, but something to be carried with care. So, the paradox leaves us with this truth. The greatest power is not the ability to control others, but the ability to control oneself. True power is not domination, but discipline. It is not found in conquest, but in character. And the moment we understand this, power stops being a trap and becomes a tool for something greater. The paradox of letting go. Letting go is one of the hardest lessons in life. We cling to people, memories, dreams, and even pain because they feel like part of us. To let go feels like betrayal, as though releasing someone or something means it never mattered. And yet, holding on too tightly often suffocates us. We become trapped in what was, unable to step into what could be. This is the paradox of letting go. That freedom comes not from clinging, but from release. That in losing, we often gain. That in surrendering, we sometimes discover the strength we were searching for all along. At first, letting go feels like defeat. Whether it is letting go of a relationship, a failed dream, or a painful past, it can feel as though we are giving up. We tell ourselves that holding on proves our strength, that endurance means love, that persistence guarantees victory. But the paradox is that not everything is meant to be carried forever. Some things, no matter how precious, are not meant to stay. Letting go is not weakness. Sometimes, it is the deepest act of courage. The paradox sharpens in love. To love someone deeply is to want to hold them close forever. Yet, real love often requires letting them go, letting them grow, letting them change, even letting them leave. Possession kills love. Freedom allows it to breathe. The paradox is that by loosening your grip, you give the bond space to thrive. And if it ends, you honor it by setting it free rather than chaining it down. Letting go also applies to identity. We carry versions of ourselves that no longer fit, old beliefs, outdated roles, past mistakes. We hold on to guilt, shame, or an image of who we once were, fearing that without it, we won't know who we are. But identity is fluid, ever-changing. The paradox is that to become more of ourselves, we must let go of who we used to be. Growth is impossible without release, and yet, letting go is not forgetting. This is another layer of paradox. To let go is not to erase, but to release the hold. You can carry the memory of someone, honor the lessons of failure, or cherish the beauty of a moment without being imprisoned by them. Letting go is not abandonment. It is transformation. It is shifting the weight from burden to wisdom, from chains to wings. The paradox of letting go also reveals itself in control. We cling to control because uncertainty terrifies us. We plan, predict, and prepare as if life can be mastered, but life will always remain unpredictable. The harder we try to control everything, the more anxious and powerless we feel. Paradoxically, it is only when we let go of control, when we accept uncertainty, when we surrender to the flow of life, that we discover peace. Letting go does not mean chaos, it means trust. In grief, letting go feels impossible. How can you let go of someone you loved with your whole heart? But grief itself carries the paradox. Letting go of their physical presence does not mean letting go of love. The bond remains, reshaped into memory, carried in the soul. Letting go of the pain does not mean letting go of the person. It means allowing yourself to live again while honoring them within you. Ultimately, the paradox of letting go teaches us that clinging keeps us stuck, while release allows us to move. To let go is not to lose, but to make space, for growth, for healing, for new beginnings. It is not an act of abandonment, but of faith. Faith that life continues, faith that love remains, faith that we can carry forward without carrying everything. So, the paradox leaves us with this truth. Letting go is not the end of the story. It is the beginning of a new one. In release, we do not diminish what was. We make room for what can be. And sometimes, the most powerful way to hold on is to let go